it, brother.
Dude.
All the way to Knoxville, Tennessee.
All the way, man. Cute little town. Kind of reminds me of Boulder.
Yeah, I came from Atlanta and then San Diego, and then now I'm here. It's home.
It's a cool
You
town.
made the flight out. Thank you. Welcome to HQ, Apex Revenue. So typically these podcasts, it's usually me and JJ. It's called Empty the Clip. And we empty the clip. We got 5 or 6 topics we run through. This is a little bit different. You post on LinkedIn, you're like, yo, I want to do Joe Rogan style. I think both you and I are probably in the same boat where it's like, I don't want to be pigeonholed to the sales guy forever. And so let's have real life conversations. So congrats on Gap Selling. It's a great book. Don't care that much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I do care. It's a great book. One of my SDRs like you, I've read the book 10 times. So I want to go straight in, just deep.
All right, let's make it roll.
Everyone knows you. If they don't know you, they can look them up. But what I want to know more is, how do you define identity? Who is Keenan?
My identity or identity in general?
Both. I want to hear both.
Look, I think identity is that piece of that person we are to ourselves, right? So who am I is Keenan. Who am I is Joey. Who am I, right? And that's your identity. I think the real question that I don't think enough people ask is not what is identity, but how do you define identity? Like what does that mean
for yourself?
Yes, for yourself. And I think at the end of the day, what identity means is who you choose to be. Right? Now look, we're all born with certain personality traits and strengths and weaknesses. But I don't think those are your identity, right? Your identity is how you choose to leverage those things to present yourself to the world, and not present yourself necessarily physically, but present yourself and how do I show up, right? How do I show up with friends? How do I show up with family? How do I show up at work? How do I show up as a leader? Like, how do I choose to show up?
Yep.
That's identity. And I think the biggest concern with showing up with identity is most people are not deliberate with it. Very few people, in my experience, are deliberate with their identity. It's default. And when you default with your identity, you are easily swayed. You're easily swayed, right? You don't necessarily know what you're doing in the moment. You think you do, but you're reacting to the emotion you have, you're reacting to the situation, you're reacting to social norms. But identity allows you to navigate those things with purpose.
Yes.
Right? And I just don't think, I mean, look, if I could change one thing about the world, it's getting people to be more real with who they are and why they choose to show up and what the drivers to that are.
Did you have a strong identity?
No, because I wasn't conscious of it. I was told, people would tell you who I was, right? And they'd tell you what they saw in me, but I didn't realize or wasn't deliberate with that until I'd probably say it started culminating in my early 30s. Is I really started to realize, wait, I can be somebody. There's something important to me. I can make a difference. I have a voice. I have belief systems, and I'm going to stick to these belief systems. So as I started realizing I had all of this, then it helped me start to realize, well, shoot, this is who I am. And so I'm going to very deliberately build on this identity and how I choose to show up.
What is your identity today?
I would argue my identity is a couple of things, but one is a fighter, right? I don't like to fight for fighting purposes, and fighting I don't necessarily mean like putting on the gloves and knocking heads, but what I mean is that I just don't accept the status quo very well, right? So if things are working, great, I'll accept it, but if something isn't working, I just don't accept that. And my identity is more about fixing, it's more about advancing, it's more about growth, right? Like I'm a problem solver. There you go. I think I've had to say my identity is a problem solver. Okay. My kids joke, I'll be, hey, what does daddy do? And the girls go, get shit done, right? Yeah. So,
USD, baby.
Yes. So that, and I would say that's it. Sort of someone who just battles the status quo, problem solver, gets things done, and doesn't, I've been called irreverent is probably a good choice of words. Yeah. Not for reverence sake, but there's so much around us. Remember what I said before? People don't pick their identity, they just default.
Yes.
Well, imagine an entire society, not just in the United States, but I would say in the world, an entire population where about 85 or 90% of people just default to their identity. Well, if everybody's defaulting to an identity, how do you think that cascades out, right? Laws that are all jacked up, relationships that are jacked up, environments that are jacked up. And so I'm the guy who sees all that. Like, we can't have that. We got to fix it. That can't happen. I'm going to argue. So I'm constantly trying to fix or improve or strengthen.
So I want to go back to that, but you mentioned choose to be. I think self-awareness is key, right? Because I think that you have to be aware of the identity. So one thing so we talked about this when we had coffee this morning. So for me, I have these things called declarations. And one of the things that for me, as part of my declarations, because people have like affirmations, right? And it's all about ideals, and they're not from like a place of authenticity. They're more from like this is what I aspire to be, therefore I will speak it into existence. Which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's in the right direction. I think there's a choice, to your point, of choosing to be, but I think there is a requirement prior to choosing, which is self-awareness. I know we talked about self-awareness a little bit. You want to elaborate on self-awareness, the importance?
Yeah. Look. I often speak in absolutes, but I don't think in absolutes. So that's one of my own personal
it's polarizing.
Goals or objectives is to learn to speak in less absolutes, right? But still get the message across. Because sometimes if you don't speak in absolutes, people get lost. They just can't keep up. But when it comes to self-awareness, I don't think enough people actually stop and think, what do I believe? What am I doing? Right? So I'm going to give an example here. And I don't even know this person. So I don't even think they'll figure me out, but they might. So I'm watching Instagram the other day, right?
Okay.
And I see this woman.
The source of truth.
Yes, source of truth. And I see this woman who's a skier. I think she's German or Austrian. Very attractive girl. Extremely attractive, right? Maybe between 27 and 32, right? And she has this picture, and on it she writes about her frustration with men on her DMs and in her comments. I'll marry you. I love you. You're so beautiful. And she's lamenting about all of these comments, and she calls it disgusting. And some of you are probably married. Some of you are old men. Just leave me alone or stop, blah, blah, blah. And all these other women are coming on and saying, we got to stop this and da-da. And I was like, you're right. But then I went to her page. Now, she's a skier. That's for real.
Sure.
And out of fairness to her, I didn't go through every single post. But of the, 100 I saw, maybe 15 were her of actually skiing. They were all pictures of her face, and some were mountains, but I would say 50% were of her face, her smiling, of her. Just her. Not even her doing something unique. Just her.
It's an invitation.
Yes. So now, it's not an invitation to I don't agree. So this is where I got to be careful, because I don't agree with what the men are saying.
Sure.
Okay, this is where the personal accountability comes in and the self-awareness.
100%.
But she wasn't self-aware enough to say, I am gaining popularity by leveraging my looks. And I need to understand, right, wrong, or indifferent, if I choose to lead with my looks, this is what can be expected.
That's right.
Right? So that's what I mean by self-awareness. People are so fucking bullshitting themselves. Look, girl, you're right. You're absolutely right. You shouldn't have to deal with that. But you felt, for whatever reason, that you wanted to build a personal brand around the concept of skiing based on your physical appearance. So please, stop. And all you women listening say, well, that doesn't mean she deserves it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, from a self-awareness perspective, I need to understand, what am I doing? Why did I feel, or do I feel, that I wanted to build the brand around my looks? What am I getting for that? She is a good skier. The pictures I've seen, she's a good skier. Why isn't it the inverse? Why am I not seeing 80% of your videos and pictures of you ripping it up, doing something else, and 10 or 15% on your looks? No. So this is what I mean by self-awareness. We move through life refusing to take ownership and understand the decisions we're making, why we make them, what we're doing, and what we're getting out of it, right? So there's a good example. Not enough people stop, look internally, and say, okay, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not doing, these are my motivations. I mean, I do it every day. Okay, I didn't like what I just did there, I got to fix it. So that was a long answer, but yeah, self-awareness, we got to do better.
Well, you mentioned too, like, as you talked about how a lot of it is like stopping and understanding, what is it that I believe? But I think it goes even a step further. What am I programmed to believe?
Okay.
Because to her point, right? Yes, dude's doing that. It's expected at this point, looking at culture. Ownership on her point would say, I think everything in the world would be solved through, to Jocko Willink's point, extreme ownership. Because I think that you could take her a step further as, why is she programmed to do that?
Yes.
The platform rewards it.
Yes.
Why does the platform reward it? Well, because they get their incentives and monetization off of that.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And why do we care about monetization? Well, because capitalism or because of venture capital invested in the platform that says that you should promote these things because this gets more clicks, and you get more clicks, you get more DMs, and it perpetuates the platform. I think that if we extrapolate society today, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, where are we at in the world today? What's wrong with it?
Massively insecure.
Elaborate.
It's funny. This is an interesting cascade of these questions. It goes back to lack of self-awareness, and the lack of self-awareness goes back to my identity. And so if I don't have an identity, I have no confidence. If I have no confidence, I'm insecure. If I'm insecure, then I'm looking for affirmation. If I'm looking for affirmation, I'm going to leverage whatever it is I have to get that affirmation. And if I don't have anything, or I don't believe I have anything that can get me affirmation, then I'm going to be angry. Right? So now I'm angry because no one's paying attention to me. I don't feel anybody loves me. I don't feel anybody appreciates me. I don't think anybody respects me. So it becomes this vicious cycle, right? A lot of people are very lucky. They're born thin, fit, tall. They're born with these gifts that they didn't earn. So they're the lucky ones.
Handsome.
Yeah. They're the lucky ones, right? But there are a lot of people who aren't born with natural, I don't know what other word you gifts or traits. I'll go with that. Natural traits that society embraces off the top, right? So it's not fair and it sucks and I get it, but some people have to work harder to find their place to get that affirmation. So things like social media, et cetera, feed into the insecurity. Our country, but Western world, I've been to all the continents of Antarctica, but I can't say I'm an expert, but I just think people are people. And I think you have we're at a time now where people are so unbelievably insecure, and we're actually making it worse. We're feeding on that insecurity and making them more insecure rather than the other direction. I think we're fucked in this regard. Everybody is insecure.
So practically then, if someone says, cool, Keenan, great, maybe I'm insecure, maybe I'm programmed to believe, maybe I do need to stop. What's the practical, what do we do about that? If someone says, cool, I want to change, great, I don't want to fall into this programming either. How let me put it back on you. How did you say, because you said you didn't always have a strong identity, et cetera, how did you get to a point in your life, your career, et cetera, where maybe being fed other people's opinion or circumstances is what shaped who your identity? Like one of my declarations is, who I am is not defined by human opinion nor my circumstances, but by my Creator who has called me. Right? That's something I tell myself every morning. But that's an evolution of Joey that got to that point. How would you say that you got to a point where you were, one, aware enough, and then two, what did you do about it?
Values.
Okay.
Values. And when I say values, I say what's important to me, not values as moral values. Like look, I don't care what anybody believes. I really don't. Outside of, if you believe hurting people is part of your value system, then I care. Outside of that, I don't really care what your values are, right? And so for me, the process was I learned what my values were. And once I understood what my values were, that gave me the confidence to act in the way that I was acting, even if that meant other people didn't like it. Even if that meant I was on an island by myself, I was like, look, this is what I believe. And for me, and even if I say this now, you can see me go like this. It's because I believe it, to my core. And my values are primarily people and doing the right thing. And then I guess that when it's not people, it's maximizing an environment.
Yes.
Right? So if it's people first, I want to do right by people. Look, don't get me wrong. I fight with people. I sometimes say things I shouldn't. No one's perfect, but my values is, generally speaking, what guides me every day is, am I making a difference in people's lives? Am I honoring who they are as an individual? Even something as simple as holding the door for almost everybody when I'm coming out of a restaurant or off an elevator, or picking something up for someone who dropped something on the street, or standing up and helping someone get their bag about. I'm constantly, how can I help? And so once I understood these values and I knew why they were important to me, then it became really easy to begin to live my life on my terms, so that when I did something that made somebody angry, unless it was outside of my value realm, I was like, I don't give a shit, fuck you. The fact that I'm bothering you doing this, not my problem, because I'm doing the right thing. So I think people don't understand their values. What's important to them? Why is it important? And how does that build who they are?
You ever read Power vs. Force? Super interesting book. A little heady, but he talks a lot about like consciousness and frequencies and calibrations of consciousness, and they talk a lot about how there's a rating score. How he rates it's a little bit like Fugazi kind of thing to me, but principally I think it makes a ton of sense. So he talks a lot about like certain religions in certain different time periods have had different levels of consciousness, and certain people have certain levels of consciousness, but certain emotions and states of being also have a level of consciousness. And so you tend to have like your low level of consciousness, which is like anxiety, depression, envy, a lot of those types of things, and you can kind of feel that energy off people. Well, it's interesting, there's different states of being that, like love has a higher level of consciousness, right? It's like a 500 out of 1,000. Again, how he calibrates that, God knows. Some kinesiology thing he does. But what they find is the highest level of frequency from a state of being perspective, which is, it like well outweighs joy and love, which is surprising. You'd think that's like number one, is authenticity. There's a guy I really like, Werner Erhard. You ever heard of him?
No. I'm over 100 right now.
It's okay, bro. That's good. That's where the melding of minds. Werner's a super interesting guy, and he talks a lot about being, like who like we are human beings, which is an offshoot of being in general. And he talks about like you have to be willing to sit in a place of being authentic about your inauthenticities.
Keep going.
So he's talking a lot about oftentimes to the point of knowing yourself and choosing who you're going to be. We still are who we are currently, right? And so we might speak that over ourselves, like I am a failure, I am whatever. But there are inauthenticities within all of us, right? There are things that we're just naturally inauthentic about. And he says the first step is you must become radically authentic about that inauthenticity.
Yes, okay, yeah, 100%.
So authenticity, I think, one, it has the highest level of consciousness, vibrational, whatever calibration on this guy's scale. I think it's true whether the guy's measurement is right or wrong or how it gets there. But I'd love to hear your opinion on authenticity in general.
Yeah, I think authenticity is sort of goes back to what I was saying before, right? It's being maniacally real about who you are. And let me rephrase it, not who you are, who you've chosen to be. Right now, I don't believe you are somebody, right? And I think this goes back to what I was saying before. The biggest problem I see in societies today is we all exist. We can't get away from that. So we have one of two choices. We exist by default or we exist by design. And I honestly believe, as deep as my soul is and as angry as it's going to make most people, 85, 90% of the world is by fucking default.
Yes.
They are who they are by default. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have belief systems. It doesn't mean they don't have a value system. It means that they haven't sat back and been self-aware and processed through those, addressed in their life, where am I living those values? Where am I not living those values? How have I changed those values? How have I stretched the advancement of those values? Like, and been deliberate in what I'm doing, right? Not by default or kind of by default. So not to be black and white, I would say that most people are 80% default and 10% or 20% deliberate, right? Okay. So an example would be that parenting. I know we're going to get there later, but I think most parents feel they're being deliberate when they have kids and raising them. I want to protect my kids. Okay, so that's them being 10% deliberate. Where their default is they've never defined what protect means. They don't actually evaluate their behavior and how they're raising those kids against that concept of protection. Do you see what I'm saying? So here's my tiny little box of definition of my deliberateness, but the majority of my behavior and what I'm doing is defaulting to something, not being real. So I think to your point about, what was the question on authenticity? Yeah. Yeah, is you can't be authentic. You literally can't be unless you've designed your life based on your value system, based on self-awareness and a solid understanding of who you are, why you're that, let me rephrase it, who you want to be, why you're that way, what the objectives are, what failure looks like, and how it impacts the world, or why you've chosen those value systems. All of that has to be addressed constantly. Yes. And if it's not, you can't be authentic. So you need that first. So this concept of authentic is a great conversation, but 90% of the conversation is how do I get authentic? Because being authentic becomes a cakewalk once you do that. It's a cakewalk. It becomes self-reinforcing, right? Self-reinforcing.
Do you have a desire to be liked?
Yes, of course I do. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't.
Sure.
And that's part of the struggle. Like anything else, right? Let's say we think of MMA. I would love to do MMA, but I know I couldn't handle the fucking pounding after. I was like, no, I get nothing out of it. And look, I love the idea of learning and fighting, but there's a point where I don't need to get up and have a knot this big, or better yet, have a knot this big enough to stay in and keep fighting. Like that, that doesn't, my head doesn't operate that way. So, but what was the point of that? But yes, I absolutely have a desire to be liked. We all do. What gets me through that comes back to my values, right? And the real question is my desire to be liked outweighed by my value system? Or does it outweigh my value system? Another way to put it. Does my desire to be liked outweigh my value system? And the answer is absolutely not. And I'll give you a perfect example. My company does a lot of sales training. I do less and less of it.
Sure.
Okay, my team does more and more of it. But when someone says we want Keenan to do it, they now have to sign a disclosure that basically says Keenan's training is PG-13 to R because it swears in his language. Keenan is here's our wording. Keenan is extremely human. He will hug, compliment, etc. Okay? That's who I am. I love people. What was the first thing I said to you when I saw you for the first time? I said, I give you a hug, dog.
Give you a hug, but I'm sick.
But I got a cold, and I don't want to do that to you. But I hug women, men, kids, right? I love people. That's part of who I am. I love people. And the more I think about it, I get super emotional about people I don't even know because I can attach my empathy to people's struggles. I had a very interesting childhood. So my point in that is I'll do these trainings, and I just did one the other day, right? If you know anything about an MPS score, right? So if they're 9s and 10s, it's a promoter, and then 5 or 6 to 8 is passive. And then I got, out of 22 recipients so far, I got 10 promoters. I got 10 passives, 2 detractors. In my little head, how the fuck can you have 10 promoters? Oh my God, this is a 9 or a 10. Best thing I've ever seen in my life, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 fucknuts like, didn't know what he was talking about. Get rid of Keenan. Worst experience ever. The training was horrible. Process that. It's situations like that make me realize trying to be worried about being liked is fruitless. 10 motherfuckers were like.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, 10 motherfuckers were like, oh my God, off the charts, best thing I've ever had. And yet, there are 2 people who couldn't stand me. If I spend my life catering to those knuckleheads, I'm done.
100%.
And I'll give you this, and it's a transition to somebody that is on here, but how do I put this? I have learned, and I learned this through my divorce. It was a pain. My divorce, I was going to be married for life. Like, I was madly in love. Won't go into it too much, but it fell apart, and she just didn't like me as a person. I don't know how she fell in love with me, but she didn't like me as a person. And she would bitch and moan about all the things she hated about me. And I was pretty devastated for a good 6 or 7 years. It took me a long time to get over this divorce. And one of the defining moments was we were in another fight. You'd think we'd stop fighting. We're not married anymore. We're like, you know what I'm saying? You'd think we're done fighting, but somehow we got
kids together.
Yeah, we got kids together, and we started fighting about fucking something. And she went off again and listed all the things that make me an asshole in her mind. And I was reading the list. It struck me. Almost everything on that list was what every other girl I had ever dated loved about me. And I was like, wait, it was like poof. When somebody doesn't like you, it says nothing about you and everything about them.
It's a conversation to have with people on my team. So in sales or services or customer success or whatever, I think there's a temptation to people please. Back to the point of power versus force, where he talks about authenticity. There's nothing more inauthentic than people pleasing.
Yes.
Because what you're doing is you're living a version of your life that they want you to live.
Yes.
As opposed to, no, I'm authentically me. And this is another word I want to throw out there. I think people are attracted and repelled by conviction.
Yes.
So that's why I asked about being liked is I don't care. I actually if someone asks me, do I care to be liked? My answer is no. But I want to be loved. But who do I want to be loved by? I want to be the people who love me for the spine that I have, the conviction that I have over my values, over my identity, who I am. Now, obviously, it creeps in. Of course, I do want to be liked. So I'm speaking in absolutes, right? But for me, I think that our culture lacks a conviction. Or maybe they don't lack a conviction, but they lack a conviction of an authentic belief system, right? I think that people fold like a lawn chair if they have a conviction about something that's programmed.
Yes, 100%. Well put.
And so I think that when someone has a conviction of something that is programmed, the stability of that of those values, again, not that they don't believe it, but their conviction behind it is weak. I think that's what we're seeing is whatever the movements might be or the groups of people that form or the mobs that come, I think that in time, those people fold like lawn chairs because they've not developed a true, authentic conviction of who they actually are.
So I'm going to disagree a little here.
Do it.
But we're on the same page. I don't think they fold. I think they double down.
Do you?
I kind of wish people would fold. Now, maybe in one-on-one arguments, et cetera, but as far as moving through society in their life, no, I don't think they fold at all. I think they double down and triple down. Because if I fold, then I was wrong. If I fold, then I'm conceding to the other party or I'm conceding to the other person, I'm conceding to the other ideas. And even if that idea is right, so if you've ever read the book Mistakes Made But Not By Me, oh my God, you got to read that. Freaking phenomenal.
Mistakes made
but not by me.
Okay.
And it's this concept of cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
So if I have a belief system and I believe it wholeheartely, but to your point, most of it's fed to me, right? So I'm buying into it for whatever reason, whether it's theoretical or whether it's religious-based or politically based or race-based, whatever the theme is. I'm given these belief systems, right? And they turn out to be factually wrong. But even saying that in their head, they're not wrong. But to your point, these convictions, I'm not going to fold on these convictions because that means I was wrong. And if I was wrong, then I have to face, this is where self-awareness comes in. Then I have to acknowledge I made a mistake. I have to acknowledge I'm not the person who I think I am. And most people can't do that. So you got to read this book. It's so good. But one of the things I'll never forget when I read it, they talked about, and you still see this today, prosecutors in death penalty cases where it was overturned through DNA.
Yes.
Okay? So think about this. If a prosecutor gets DNA during the trial, there's no doubt in her head's mind, that person's guilty. End of discussion. DNA says it, right? But when the person is released or exonerated on DNA, they don't buckle. They start coming up with some of the fucking craziest theories. One is an additional sleeper or additional partner. So have you ever heard of that? So when the DNA doesn't match, what they say is, well, that person still did it, and that DNA is from an additional person they had consensual sex with or something. But the point in the whole story is they don't just drop it, apologize, oh my God, we're sorry. They double down and triple down to keep the person in jail. And the argument is, this is to your point, that conviction. Prosecutors are supposed to be the good guys. They're the ones who get the bad guys off the street.
That's right.
If I put a good guy in jail for 1, 3, 9, 50, 20 years, and he never did it, I'm not the good guy anymore. And so that doesn't feel good. They're not self-aware enough and strong enough in the conviction of doing the right thing that they can't come forward and say, oh my God, we're sorry, this is a horrible justice, and be on the same team, right? Their conviction was never around doing the right thing. Their conviction was around being right and bolstering themselves.
Which comes back to your insecurity.
Yep. Think about that, man. Think about how devastating a world is when you have prosecutors who refuse to accept the release of prisoners on DNA, but DNA is everything when it comes time to conviction. That's all you need to know. So that's the concept of what did I say the term was? Cognitive bias. Is that what it is? No. Yep. Was it cognitive bias? No.
Didn't
we write it down? I just said it. It's not cognitive bias. It's it'll come in a minute. But yes, great book. So I forget what your original question was, but I think I answered it.
It's somewhere in there for sure. So could you extract? Let's go political for a second.
Okay.
Would Trump fall into that category?
Would Trump? Well, Trump's a straight up narcissist.
I don't disagree, but I'm saying more or less.
He's the least self-aware person on the planet.
Don't disagree. But to your point on the prosecutor,
Oh, Jack Smith?
Anybody, the media, the prosecutor, etc. Is it possible that people are so fixated on and their conviction of being right that that's a witch hunt?
No, not in this case. Well, it depends on which one. So do I believe there are people...
There's so many cases at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Do I believe that there are people on the... Okay, this will be an interesting... And I'm not even straddling, but it is a straddle by definition. Do I believe that some of these people chasing Trump are on a witch hunt? No, are zealots.
Okay. Absolutely.
However, do I believe that Trump is guilty in some certain degree to half the stuff that he's being accused of? Abso-fucking-lutely. And so I would flip it and I would say that a lot of the cognitive dissonance, that's it.
There it is.
A lot of that cognitive dissonance is on the side that says it's all a witch hunt. Everybody claiming it's a witch hunt. Come on, man. You literally have texts of Fox News saying, dude, call them off. Dude, say something different. Dude, right? No. Him going on television and saying Mike Pence can change the election. He needs to do the right thing. Come on, man. Like, I allow people to have their political differences. Totally. I have a lot of friends who voted for Trump, whether I agree or disagree. But to your point, let's be honest. Let's be honest. That's my point, right? He called up that dude from Georgia and said, Raffenberg or whatever, and said, dude, fine $115,000. Now, do I think he was telling him to cheat? No. But do I think if there was a less than legal loophole, he would have taken it in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. So, yeah, no, I think it's the other way around. Every single person who does not believe, who believes that everything that Trump is doing is a witch hunt, that's cognitive bias.
I agree. So where I was going to go with that was I think it goes both ways. I think that the cognitive dissonance on both sides is strong. I think that we've gotten to a culture where things are so binary.
Yes.
And we are so pick sides, right?
Yes.
Not even political, but we've not gotten to the point where we're so divided that we've got little sects of people throughout whatever the spectrum might be. I think that there's a cognitive dissonance on those who are pro-Trump, he's Jesus walking, and then there's those who are anti-Trump, anything but Trump, no matter what, he's in the wrong. And so I think there's an interesting, and this is probably a life lesson for all of us, is just at the end of the day, there's probably a middle ground in most of these circumstances. So let's take a little pivot.
Hold on, let's stay there real quick.
Okay.
So I agree with you. Because remember I said, look, do I think the zealots on the left that are going after Trump? 100%. But I think that middle ground as it relates to Trump, okay, is that middle ground is further into he did shit wrong and illegal than it is to he didn't.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's where I get frustrated, particularly again on the great. I left and I brought up self-awareness. I ask this question every time before I start talking about the right or whatever. And there's been times I've defended the right against the left and their crazy shit sometimes. But I always go through this process first. I know I'm on the left. I could have bias. So how much of this is bias versus how much of this is objective as you can be? And I feel very convicted that Trump absolutely pisses off the left, and there's bazillion zealots, and just as there are these zealots on the right, but if we, to your point, go to the middle, he is not on the cusp of kind of doing things wrong. His ass is squarely in the I've done fucked up shit and it needs to be remedied. Right now, as far as the left is saying, probably not.
Yep.
But there's no way this man is in the middle or slightly to I haven't done anything wrong, and that's where I fall on this one. That's why I'm anti-Trump. I'm not going to debate you the level of wrong shit because it's a waste of time. He's done too much shit wrong, and no one's admitting it.
I think that's my point. We get to such a binary place. He's wrong. Period. Well, wrong on what count, right? Like there's multiple counts. Some he's right on, some he's wrong on. And so I think now where there is wrong, there needs to be justice, and so on and so forth. So let's take a slight pivot then to victim culture.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite topics. Extreme ownership. We both talked about it. Let's actually take it to business because everyone who's watched this is probably in the business category. Where are you seeing victim culture in business today?
Everywhere.
Let's talk about sales, the sales world.
Again, everywhere in sales world. I don't think managers are taking responsibility for the coaching and development of their own people. I don't think salespeople are taking ownership and management or accountability, I should say, for the work they do and for their own development and learning. I don't think senior level management is taking ownership for the cultures they've created, for the environments they've built. I don't think anybody's taking ownership anywhere. Like literally anywhere. When this airs, it'll probably be over, but I won't mention any names, but we are in the process of bidding or in the running for a pretty major piece of business. And we have a couple of these, so really big ones. So if anybody's listening against you, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because we got 3 or 4 of these going on, but this is a really big one. And we submitted a lot of stuff, right, to all of these companies. I'll do it this way so no one can pin it down. So as we're chasing all of these giant enterprise deals, we submitted a fairly large document, almost 70 pages to each of these organizations. And in one of them, no one's reading it. Mm-hmm. The buyers aren't reading it. Literally, the buyers are not they asked us to do it. They literally asked us to do it. And they're not reading it. And yet they're going to make a decision on who they go with without doing their work. And then when it fails, or if it fails, they'll act as if it's not their fault. Mm-hmm. Right? So yeah, I see it everywhere. Everywhere.
I have a hard time, as an employer, and you're an employer yourself, I think that there's more than ever, now we can argue there's time in history where this has also been the case, but there almost appears to be a war on employees versus employers. I don't deal with that shit in my company.
Give me an example. War on
let's go on LinkedIn, the cesspool of the world. Like I said, I like to be loved, not liked.
Yep.
The amount of shit posting about employers who fire someone.
Yeah.
And nowadays with social media, we have the ability to broadcast to millions of people. Let's take an example, the Cloudflare situation.
Yeah.
Remember that one?
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Oh, I disagree. I think it's awesome.
Okay, let's go there. No,
yeah, I love it. I think it was awesome. Especially Cloud. I don't even know the guy, but okay, I won't call names. It's the guy's second complete screw up.
Totally.
So, but anyways, you go. I want to hear your piece.
But there's this mob mentality of this girl was, to binary case, 100% in the right for posting this. Cloudflare was 100% in the wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? As an employer, I get to look at it from a different lens. I've been both employee-employer. Mm-hmm. I can't sit there and say she's 100% in the right or Cloudflare's 100% in the wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But we've gotten to this point now where employees see it from their lens, right? I think we all look through a lens and we choose, again, to the point of choosing, we choose the lens we look through. And we've gotten to a place now where I think employees, whether it's leverage or whatever they might have nowadays, have started to band together against employers to where they believe employers are responsible for everything in their life.
Okay. Yeah.
You agree with
that? I do. And I think that's the absolute wrong way of looking at it. So I love how we're trying to pull this binary piece. It's interesting. I went through this and watched this not from the perspective of an employee. I looked at it as perspective of an employer. Okay. And this is why I have Cloudflare, the CEO you want to meet sometime and talk if you don't like what I'm about to say, because I'll own, I don't know the guy, I don't know the company. Yep. I just know what I've seen in 2 instances, reading his words, right? Not just one side, reading his words, their press releases, listening to what his people said to that girl on the phone, listening to the girl. So my viewpoint is based on a small data set, but that data set is directly from them, not my opinion, right? So I pushed it through the lens of an employer who owns people, who employs people, right? And the first thing I thought of is, why the hell is HR telling her that she's fired? Why is her manager not here? And why can nobody tell her what she did wrong?
That I agree with.
So once it got to there, I know it maybe seemed like I'm on the employee side, but I'm looking at if this were my company, I would have fired every single person. What the fuck? What culture did I create? See what I'm doing here? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about victim. What culture did I create that those HR people felt that was okay?
Yes.
Right? So I never looked at it from her perspective. I was looking at it as an owner. Because in my company, I hate, if anything, I have a weakness, is I keep people way too long.
Me too.
I keep them way too long.
I've got a nice alpha mentality on the outside, but that's the hardest shit I got to do.
Yes, I keep them. I desperately want to be successful. Desperately. So
more than they do most of the time.
Yes, which then becomes a problem because I'm taking more ownership for their lives than they are. But yes, you nailed it. So in my company, when we let someone go, which I hate doing, but the few times we had to do it, we give at least a month of severance. We're a small company. We're not $100 million, $50 million. We're a small company. Boy, I'm like, fuck it. What's 10 grand or 15 grand or 8 grand? Whatever. That's nothing. But to me, okay, you get my point. It's a lot of money. Don't read into that. But that's nothing to me compared to them. And not only once we do it, we let them either continue to work or we give them a heads up, like, look, this is coming. So I'm going to make this up, but it might be like, look, you're done. Take the next, let's say it's January 15th. Take the next 2 weeks, wrap things up, then we'll give you a month from, you know what I'm saying? So go start looking. Like, I want to make this soft a landing as possible.
Sure.
So that's my world. Like, so I was fucking irate when I watched that because that is just the most disgusting approach to letting someone go. So to your point, that company earned every piece of shit they got because the culture was created by leadership.
I don't disagree. Here's where my empathy kicks in as an employer. So HR shows up and does the firing.
Yep.
Not a beautiful landing, let's be honest.
Yep.
Very, very shallow in their explanations. They couldn't really give answers, et cetera. I think our culture has trained that, though. I don't necessarily think that is just a byproduct of Cloudflare's decision to create that culture. I think it is a byproduct of culture itself.
Give me an example. Or elaborate.
Employment law is a hairy thing.
Yeah.
Employers rarely win.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when it comes to firing, the more you give them, the more ammo they have to go do whatever they can do in the court of law.
Yeah.
Right. And so it would be prudent of a company to have a very shallow fire, as inhumane as it appears, right? The exposure to all the other jobs in that company, thousands of jobs, if the company takes a massive lawsuit, it doesn't affect just that person and just the company. It affects everyone else working there. And so it is prudent to say, I can't give them too many threads to pull on to then have it potentially come back to me. Because we've created a culture where employees are suing employers all day long.
Yep.
So from an empathy perspective, I can say, okay, do I think that it was a soft landing? No. Do I think that it was even the best way to handle it? Absolutely not. But can I still be empathetic to the fact that they are dealt the cards that the culture has created for them, right? So if employment law is a legit thing and lawsuits are a big thing and your objective is to protect the company, because here's what a mentor of mine once told me. He said, assuming you hire good people, right? Because you and I both do. People 99.9% of the time will land on their feet at their next job. Companies have a 90% fail rate. And so if
not for that reason, but keep
not
going.
for that reason. But companies do fail, right? And you have to make decisions that are for the greater good of the company because in Cloudflare's case, thousands of jobs they've created, right? Kudos to them. If by protecting this one person and treating them in a particular way that caters to them, you potentially put yourself at risk that affects 1,000 people. That's where I step in and say, I don't disagree, but I don't agree. And I'm in this middle. I don't play the binary game except for I'm like you where I speak absolutes. But I don't believe them necessarily. And so I speak absolutes because they're polarizing and they get more attention. So I'm an attention whore, I guess.
So I hear you. This is really interesting because this conversation started with victim mentality. And we're getting to know each other, so you won't be upset. But you just made Cloudflare a victim without trying. You literally just made them a victim to their circumstances of lawsuits, right?
Sure.
So watch what I do here. I'm going to butcher this, but there was a study that around doctors and bedside manner, okay? And the study showed that doctors with much better bedside manner were sued for malpractice at a massively lower rate than those with poor bedside manner.
Yes.
Now, I don't remember. Have you heard this?
Yeah. I have doctor friends who reference it. Yeah.
So, no, I don't remember the actual number. I wish I could because it would make for a great soundbite. But what they recognized was if Dr. A, who had horrible bedside manner, made a mistake, negligent mistake, cut off the wrong leg or whatever, would be sued for malpractice 5x more than the doctor who cut off the wrong leg but had amazing bedside manner, right? So this is why I don't have that same viewpoint too, because I agree. Now watch what we do here. I agree in the thesis that I got to protect the company.
Correct.
What I don't agree with is the choice they made to protect the company.
Sure.
That by getting HR involved and doing it the way they did it, I don't see how that's any different than anything else they could have done. Now, what they could have done is come and said, here's why you're being fired. Laid it all out. Watch what I do here. We understand you've just come off of
holiday and ramp.
Yeah, the ramp. You just come off a ramp and it was a holiday. We understand that. So understanding that, we're going to give you 6 weeks as opposed to the normal 2 weeks, right? and done the right thing. So that's good bedside manner versus bad bedside manner. So people don't sue because they get fired most of the time. People sue because you're a douche. Right? And so,
Sure.
Again, I'm hearing what you're saying,
Yep.
but my take on this is they did just the fucking opposite. In an effort to avoid being sued, they created a bigger thread. This was a little tiny thread.
Oh, yeah.
They pulled a fucking latch out there. So, this goes back to being authentic, right? The Supreme Court and Citizens United argue companies are people, right? Well, great. Let's roll with this all the way out. Seriously, again, I don't know this dude. And if he wants to talk, he's listening, let's get together and talk. But from everything I've read and seen, I think he's a douche, right? Because he doesn't operate from authenticity, and the entire culture he's built. Again, okay, I keep asking this because that's my empathy side. I don't know him. I could be wrong. But from what I've seen on the outside, from what I've read, there is zero people centricity at this company.
Agreed.
Right? And so you want to talk about avoiding lawsuits. You want to talk about creating an environment where they don't have to worry about this, then how about build a culture where people are first? And it may cost you a little more money in the end, but we're not talking 2, 3, 7, 15% of net profit or operating. No, maybe 0.5% of net profit. God forbid, as a multi-billion-dollar company, it costs you $3 or $4 million to do the extra to do the right thing.
Did they give her no severance?
I have no idea.
See,
and let's say that
we don't know.
We don't know. But I can tell you, that's my point, is you can build a culture that puts people first, that still allows you to fire, that still allows you to get rid of the underperformers, that still allows you to hold people accountable, but hold them accountable as people, not numbers.
Whenever we terminate somebody, even if I don't do it, I'll call them right afterwards.
Yep.
Doesn't make me a good person or a bad person. It's just that's how I run our company. I think for me, I'm in such a place where I'm so over the binary conversation in the world. Mm-hmm. That I forced myself to look at all sides. They did not handle that the right way. I'll be the first to say that. And that was a great comeback on that too. I think for me, we don't know enough. And I think that it's my overarching point about employees versus employers. Because everyone's like, she didn't have enough time to ramp or whatever. You and I both know. Fucking salespeople, you know. Mm-hmm. They don't have to ramp to know if they're going to perform or not, right? And so when people are like, she didn't even get time to ramp, you know, how could they fire that? Or that's a bullshit answer, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it is. Like, we don't know that for a fact. Again, there's two sides to this whole story. But the fact that we got on this train so fast with that, like, again, we don't know. Did they offer her severance? I don't know, right? We heard one call. Yep. The call wasn't great, but it was HR people doing the job that they're paid to do, the way they've been taught to do it. Argue whether that's the best way for HR to do it. I don't know. Do we know if someone called her afterwards? We don't know. But if I look at it from the bigger picture, I have to be company-centric because I'm people-centric. Mm-hmm. Because I know that I employ, the 105 people I have on my team, I have to know that if I fire this one person, it's for the betterment of the 104 remaining. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I come at it and I say, hey, I don't think that we should be jumping on a bandwagon and absolutely bashing people into the ground. I
don't think we should bash people into the ground.
That's what happened,
I bash this company into the ground. Again, it's funny how two people can operate from the same
values,
same value, and come to a different conclusion. I'm looking at this from the company perspective as well, and I'm looking at it from an accountability perspective also. Again, I'm trying to hold Cloudflare accountable and saying, dog, this could have been avoided. Like, as an owner, if I were the CEO, I would have lost my shit. And then I'd have to reflect back to self-assessment. How in the world did I create a corporate culture that this is the key piece, right? Everybody listen to me. These people felt this was okay. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is binary. They felt it was okay. The corporate culture gave them this message, implicitly or explicitly, that this type of behavior was okay. We as business owners own that. So if I decided to take a year sabbatical and left the company to Brady, unless Brady who's my COO, took a hard left turn, I know that would never happen.
Sure.
Because I know the culture we've created. Now, like anything else, you get to the edges and you go, okay, that was slightly out, but you don't take sharp left turns. So again, I'm in complete agreement with you, other than the fact that I'm looking at this from the same point you are, but not from protection, but from a dog. Mm-hmm. Wake the fuck up. Like, the culture you've created is not okay. Now, as it relates to her and her being a victim, we don't have enough information, right? Yep. The one thing that jumped out at me the most, which drives me to appear biased in this, but is, assuming she's telling the truth, again, we have to, right? Is she said, my manager told me I was doing a great job and I had no idea, okay? Now, I've sold long enough to know that I don't know what their average sales cycle is.
Yep.
So let's say their average sales cycle is
45 days.
45 days?
Or maybe it was 70. It might have been more.
Okay, so I think she was only there 90, and she said that she had already built some pipeline. Now, again, I don't know how much pipeline she built, but she built pipeline. She said that. Her manager never told her she was doing a bad job. It was over the holidays, which we all get, right? So you'd see me flip in a heartbeat, dog.
Totally.
If she hadn't been doing anything. She might, if she had said, well, the reason I didn't get any pipeline is because, and the reason I haven't closed anything because, and then I'd be like, baby, no. You ain't doing your job, right? But there was no evidence on that side, so I had to leave it alone.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know because you and I both know rampant salespeople. It's not just about quantitative data, right? There's a qualitative, and to be quite honest, someone who's recording a video like that and post it online, whether she's in the right or the wrong in terms of like, is she the victim here versus the company? It says something about character. I don't think someone should be posting a private conversation. So this is where this is where you and I are probably going to disagree. I think that probably was a reflection or an indicator of there's other things outside of just sales production. I'll fire someone who's got good numbers, but's a cancer culture or culture to my cancer or cancer to my culture.
Yep.
Or like for when people come in, we have values, right? So we have 4 values that we have. They're very, very drawn out. We keep people accountable to those 4 values. I will hire and fire, bonus, promote, et cetera, based on these values. If someone wants a raise, I'll pull out my paper. We make them sign it in page, and I'll walk them through every value. If they check the box, and sure as shit, I'm going to give you a bonus. But if you don't, I'm going to have a conversation. So when I'm looking at termination, especially during a ramp period, right? Because to a lot of people's point, she didn't have time to ramp, the deal cycle this long. That's assuming we only care about quantitative metrics in sales. What if she was a culture issue? What if she was late a bunch? What if whatever it might be, there's other qualitative issues that could be at hand that we don't have the full story on. And so back to my original point, I'm not pro Cloudflare at all. I think they fucked up. I'm not pro this girl either. I don't think she's the enemy. But it's more about the movement that swelled behind it that I think none of us have enough data to say binarily Cloudflare is fucked up and they did entirely wrong every single step of the way. And this girl was complete victim and she did this. And we shouldn't be picking teams because we don't have the data. That's where I come in.
So I think in a panacea, I would agree with you, right? I think that's a nice place to be. Based on what we do know, okay? So facts aside, based on what we do know, I think Cloudflare is the enemy in this.
Sure.
Now, I've been trying to think of one on the other side.
But is that fair?
Yeah, and here's why it's fair. Because these are facts. This is what I heard, right? So even if she was late all the time, and even if she called in sick a lot, and even if she was a cancer, Cloudflare created a culture where HR didn't tell her that.
Sure.
So this is where I don't think I'm being binary. No, I think I am. This is pretty simple. If she had those things, fucking tell her.
Sure.
You chose. This is the thing about victim that I think is interesting, right? In no sense of the imagination is Cloudflare a victim here because they made every one of these decisions,
to
right?
be clear.
So even if this girl was a complete shit show, sorry, Cloudflare, you fucked up because you had all the ammunition and you chose this path. And so I like how we're taking this back to victim. That's how I see victims. A victim to me is when you have no control or a modicum of control to your outcome, okay? So to me, Cloudflare is not a victim of all the shit they're getting, whether it's fair or not, right? Because you made that choice. You made that choice to go that route. So whether she recorded or not, immaterial to me.
They made the choice to hire her.
Yeah, okay, you go all the way that, but I let them off the hook there because you can only do so much. So I don't hold them accountable for hiring her. Like, shit happens. Like, I don't get mad at the Patriots for drafting Mac Jones. You can only do so much. It's rare.
Travesty.
Right, I know. It was. But in the moment, it seemed like a great decision. So I rarely challenge people's decisions unless it was so clearly fucked up, and they ignored stuff. But that's rare. So no, they hired her. Okay, yes, that you own that. But what you really screwed up was how you handled it. So you're not a victim. You own every single piece of that, all the way up to the culture created, et cetera. So to your point, if she was all that thing, we'll never know. We'll never know. And so Cloudflare owns it, and that's the concept of victims, right? Now, is she a victim in this? We don't know. So without the data, I'm not saying she is, and I'm not saying she isn't. I'm only operating from the data. And I was desperately trying to find some other examples on the other side, because I can tell you, I know that I would, if there was the other way, the data went down, let's say this whole conversation went the other way, and they listed all this stuff that she did and can substantiate it all, and she started going off on them and videoed it and did. I'd be like, what are you talking about, girl? You own this.
Her ass would not have posted that.
Okay, yes, fair enough. But yes, so she should act as a victim. Like, I have no qualms calling out anybody on either side, employee or employer. I just use the data in front of me.
I think that's where I'm getting to, because again, we're using a circumstance to prove a point. And we'll get off this because I think we've beat it to death at this point.
All the time in the world. I agree with you, by the way. I do agree. There was absolutely not an attack, but
because even you mentioned you got irate about it, which you were using the data you had in front of you.
Yeah.
But I think like if we take it out of business and we say, I won't make it personal on yours, but let's say there was a marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so your marriage. If someone only saw the data they had, would it be fair? That was my question. Was it fair for people to pick sides based on the data they had, or is there a lot of shit potentially that was not public about the marriage and why it fell apart and whose side they should be picking?
Okay. Great question. Phenomenal question. So in most situations, both people are at fault. In most. What we tend to gravitate to is the big transitional moment.
Yes.
Okay? And I believe that transitional moments can stand apart from the big picture. So let's just using Cloudflare. Maybe they were both in fault for the not destruction, but for the unraveling of the relationship. She didn't get the coaching she needed, but she didn't do what she needed. So they're both at fault 50-50. Okay. Yep. So I'm not saying she's not at fault for being fired, and I'm not saying they were wrong for firing her. Right.
It was how they went about the transition.
That's what we're talking about, right? Right. So I think at the end of the day, separating those two is what people have a hard time with. Yeah.
That's really good. Back on that train of victim culture then, of do we come back from this?
Yeah.
As a society, do we? Okay.
Yeah. I think it swings. I think if you're familiar with, now look, I like to be a historian, but I can't go back, 500 years, but I don't think you need to. I think if you pick everything from the Industrial Revolution on, where people's existence relied on corporate America and capitalism, you see swings.
Yes.
Okay, so if you know anything about the Pinkerton riots, if you know anything about the unionization, companies, look, quick side note, kind of delving into politics, I'm a capitalist, full on. But I'm making up a term. I'm a reasonable capitalist. And this is probably going to sting you a little because I know you're right wing.
Hey, center right.
Okay. Don't tell me we could trust businesses to do the right thing. Okay. Don't fucking tell me that. You can see how fired up I'm getting. Tired of that fucking argument because we have so much evidence that have left to themselves, capitalism will eat itself alive. Marx was right. Like if you ever read Marx, he was right. Capitalism will eat itself alive. We have to have regulation. Now, too much, I get it. I don't want too much. I don't want less. So we can debate where that moves. But please do not tell me that businesses left to their own will do the right thing. We have all the experience of the 20s with child labor, with monopolies, with your boy Rockefeller and how he took over. Like, come on, man. Come on, right? Like,
well, you're looking at today. It's pharma, insurance, and healthcare.
Yeah. So
banking.
So my point in this is, in the 20s and 30s and all of that stuff, big business was the bad guy. End of discussion. We figured it out. We started creating unions. We had regulation like OSHA and child labor laws and minimum wage. And that stuff made a difference. And we started to see a swing towards the employee, right? And it went for a while, but then that got out of hand. When you've got unskilled laborers making $100K and they're going on strike because, for whatever particular reason, they don't feel they're getting paid enough and not enough benefits. When you got to a place where a union worker who was sitting, I'm going to make this up, but I'm not off, who was sitting next to, let's say, a trash bag that needed to be emptied or something, that's not my job description. It could literally stand there and not do anything and not get fired because that wasn't his job and they had to call another person whose job it was to, in the labor contract to do that, that's when it went the wrong way. And now businesses are getting screwed and we need to fix that. And so now what I think we're seeing is that slide from the height of the mid-'80s and the centricity on the worker and workers' rights and all that, and then Reagan came in, we're seeing it shift, but I think it shifted too far. I think we're the closest we've ever been to the 1920s from a wealth gap and a minimum wage and workers' rights that we've been, I guess, in almost 100 years. So I think it's going to come back. It has to. It will. And it'll go too far, and we'll all get pissed off that all these workers are milking the system, and it'll swing right back again.
But is America fucked?
No.
The reason I asked that, I agree with the pendulum. Every great empire, nation, et cetera, has fallen at some point.
Yeah.
At some point, the pendulum swings, but then you knock the fucking pendulum over. It doesn't matter. So at what point, if any, do we see that where America has gone past the point of return?
Okay. So leveraging my knowledge of history, and I hear this a lot, and knowing, I pat myself on the back, but I'm sure someone said it. I don't look like I'm smart right now.
If my conference table wasn't so long, I'd dap you up.
Yeah, thank you, baby. The one thing that's different from all other empires, or we'll call it other empires, is that they were all had dictators or emperors or kings, or like power was concentrated in a family or family name or small tight-knit group of people and didn't deviate, right?
Yep.
So they're bound to fall after a while, right?
Okay.
So if I'm a genius and I have a shitty ass son and my son fucks it all up, right? People, or the other piece, people don't have a vote, they don't have a belief in the process. That's why they fell. Okay. America has that. So we're messed up and all that. But at the current, and for the last 200 years, we haven't had anybody that's an emperor. We've had easy transition of power. You know what I'm saying? And I think that keeps
minus J6.
I know. I wasn't. Yeah. I was trying to think whether I wanted to go there or not. But
I'm on the right side, but
yes,
I'm reasonable.
Yes. So okay. So yes. So that's why I don't think we're fucked. As long as we can stay on that path where we have a president no more than 8 years, where they're voted in, whether or not you like their politics, they can be voted out. As long as we can stay in that level of a republic, of our republic/democracy, I think we could last forever. China is coming on, but I believe China is in trouble for the same reason other empires are, is they're run by a despot. And despots, I don't care how many generations, it can't stay forever because people finally get fed up. They finally, you know what I'm saying? So as a long answer to your question, and now you brought up J6, I believe in my heart of hearts, the Supreme Court is in a really shitty place right now.
Yep.
But they have to do two things. Here's the short answer to your question. America is fucked if the Supreme Court rules that Trump, i.e. any president, has complete immunity as president. That, mark my words, everybody, mark them. If the Supreme Court comes back and says that, that's the beginning of the end. Because what that sets up is what?
Dictatorship.
That sets it up. So that moves us into dictatorship. We have no way of getting rid of somebody, and we're so partisan. Like, the soil is so fertile right now that with this partisanship, that if we give even the slightest pathway to dictatorship, that partisan group will drive them there. And I'd go the other way too, right? Like, I know it's going to sound messed up, but if I'm Biden and the Supreme Court says I have 100% immunity, fuck it. I'm making first move. Nope, I'm not leaving office. Nothing you can do. Like, nothing you can do. You said I'm immune. I'm not leaving office. Like, that's the first step. So that's why I think we're in trouble. The second one is if they say that Trump can be on the ballot, I think you should leave it to states. I don't think the federal should get involved, but I think states should be allowed to say.
It's very small government of you.
Yeah, right. I get no problem with that. I don't like Roe v. and Wade be overturned, but I'm okay with the states doing it. So I didn't see it as an overturning. If you want it in your state, then fix it, right? Which I thought was interesting because Kansas had and other red states have. But I digress. The other piece is they have to hold him accountable for January 6th. They have to. And if they say that he has complete immunity and...
What is he accountable to? I just want to clear that up.
The state should have the right not to put him on the ballot for insurrection. It's clear as shit. It's the level of what's the word, of us, not maturation. Is that right, Match? Doesn't matter. The level of bullshit we're putting forward to try to argue he wasn't part of an insurrection is making me sick. Or some people saying, well, it doesn't account for presidents. It literally says who took the oath of office, right? And so the fact that it doesn't say president is immaterial to me. It says took the oath of office. So if they don't hold him accountable for that, i.e. allow states who choose to take him off the ballot, I think those are the only two reasons I think we're in trouble. If we can uphold those two things, which don't allow a dictatorship to sneak in, I think America's going to go like this, but I don't think we're in trouble. We're in trouble the minute we get into a dictatorship type environment. Then it's just a matter of time.
Understood.
That was a lot.
No, it's super good. If you guys haven't gathered yet, those watching, I'm left. I'm center right. Keenan is center left. The funny thing is that we can go on both sides and be reasonable.
Yeah.
This is why, like, the fucking podcast should just be called "It's Not Binary."
Yeah, I like that too. Yep.
I've evolved a lot in this because I've swung. I was a liberal. I was hardcore social justice warrior. I worked in the inner city. I saw poverty. I saw socioeconomic classes pushed down to some degree. And then I went far, far right where I was like, extreme ownership on all counts, blah, blah, blah. I've moved back towards the middle, and it's more about hand-ups and handouts.
Yeah, yes.
Let's go that
yes.
path, because I think that's an interesting one where you and I had a great conversation in our preliminary conversation to see if this is worth doing. Where do you think, in terms of where we go today, if we look at the state of the country, we've got topics on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've got topics on LGBTQIA. We've got race in America. We've got systemic racism. Like, let's just go down the rabbit hole on that.
Yep.
Let's start with that conversation, since I'm familiar on both sides with this particular, with inequality. What do you think about equality in general? What does equality truly mean?
Oof. I'm going to try to keep this one short. I think equality means equal opportunity.
Okay, not outcomes.
Yeah, not outcomes. No.
It's impossible.
No.
It's an impossible feat if we try to accomplish that.
Yeah, no, not outcomes. 1,000% not outcomes. Equal opportunity.
Do you think we had that in America?
No.
How so? And do you think that the divide is at a race level, at a minority level?
It's okay.
I'm white.
No way. If I had known that, I wouldn't have come today.
You are not white.
No, I am not. I'm half, but I identify as being black.
Good.
And
strong.
I'm sorry?
Strong.
Oh, I thought you said it's wrong. I'm like, interesting.
Yeah, that would have got a real spiral. We would have gone
down.
Yeah,
I would have more intrigued than anger. Like, interesting. Walk me through that. But and the reason, even though I'm half, not the reason I'm half, that's clear. My mom was black. That's thus. But the reason I identify with being black is get called nigger once. Right? Be told you can't date someone's daughter. Get followed around in a store.
100%.
Right? I was born in 1968, right? So I'm the first generation of black people born with all their rights.
Yeah.
And this country talks about, that was so long ago, so long. Like, stop, dog. Like, just stop and think about this. If I'm 56, which doesn't make me young anymore, but it doesn't make me old, right? And I'm the first generation born with all my rights, we need to really check ourselves here about how far we've come. So you asked a very complex question, but I think in many ways we're there with equal opportunity. I think the place that we're most not completely there, one is race when it comes to black Americans.
Okay. Because
the history of black Americans and how we got here and how things, the impact of race in what's the word I'm looking for? Explicit racism, overt racism, right? Which still exists. I don't think that much, but still exists. But where that overt racism was built on this this country, right? And how it created systems that blacks are still trying to get out from under and still trying to work. So I believe we don't have equal opportunity, not necessarily because of overt racism today, but because of the systems that were put in place because of overt racism, which then perpetuate subconscious bias, which is absolutely real. So when you take some of these systems and you add subconscious bias on top of it, I don't think we have complete equal opportunity. Is there opportunity? Absolutely. I'm a brother here who's had clients in the South and whatever, and I don't see it as a at a micro level, I don't see it as a detriment to me personally. But if you took 100 of me and spread me across, or 1,000 of me, we're not all going to be in the same place, not because of anything other than we have harder challenges to get over?
Here's where I land, because I would have been in the category of systemic racism. I think our problem is systemic classism.
Yes, 100%.
But here's where I think I would go on the left side here, is I think that poverty, here's why I didn't believe this. I read a book.
You're going to nail this, I think, and I'm proud of you because not many people see this.
So I read the book Hillbilly Elegy, hardcore, Rust Belt, Appalachia, right?
Yep.
They have nearly identical, if not worse, outcomes than Black America does.
Yes.
Correct, right? And so they are oppressed in their own way, right? Now, what that tells me is that the system oppresses them. It oppresses also Black America. Where I say it's systemic classism is I think that when you are born into an impoverished class, there are systems that are in your... Now, why is a majority of Black America in an impoverished class?
Because we started there.
Because of our past.
Yeah, dude, I give you mad props. Most people don't get that. That's exactly my point, but you said it so much more eloquently. We started there. And now everybody expects us just to get out of there. And I always see, I think I read the stat, 14% of people born into poverty get out of poverty. Well, guess what? 80% of America, when they first came, or 70, whatever the number, wasn't in poverty. And they've had multiple generations to get out of it once they got here. And oh, by the way, there was no structure that said you can't. So even if you were Irish or Italian and you moved here and it sucked, your son or daughter spoke fluent English by the time they were born, and they could just easily go somewhere else and not be Irish, you know what I'm saying? And do something. Blacks, not only did you see it, it was like, hey, dog, not only can you not go here, look at me like that again, and I'm going to hang you from a motherfucking tree. So just think about the psyche that creates.
100%.
Just think about how that makes you feel to even want to try to buy into the American system. Makes you even like, so, oh, yeah, dude, I give you a huge round of applause.
It's the biblical sins of our fathers, right? I think that we experience that today. Now, how we get to the answer is the bigger question. What do we actually do about that? Because to my point, I don't think systemic racism exists anymore today. I think systemic classism and a large portion of a particular race is in that class.
Yes, that's brilliantly said. Yep.
So how do we get out of that is where I think that left and right tend to differ. I'm not saying either or right. It's probably somewhere where we live in the middle. I'll put it to you. How do we get out of that?
So this is where a lot of me and my brothers and sisters don't agree. I personally, when I'm in trouble, I can't rely on other people. That's my mentality, right? Like if I'm in trouble, I'm not relying on other people. I'm going to figure it out for myself. So I believe that as a culture, as a group of people, we need to stop worrying and focusing on whether or not the government's going to fix it. They're not. They're not going to fix it. I don't think it'd be fixed any more than it is. This is where I think
capitalism and private sector is far more important than public.
Yes. So what I have said for quite some time is to make this answer a little longer. From 1950, well, I mean, obviously forever, but when it started getting hold in the early 1950s, the Civil Rights Movement, until its culmination in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, 1965 of the Voter Rights Act, and then I would even say into the mid-70s, early 80s, like 80, 81, focusing on the government, focusing on things to fix it was absolutely the right decision from an effort perspective, whether it's NCAA, whether it was... I can't remember what's coming to me in a second. Urban League was the Urban League. Whether our leaders, I don't really care. That was the right direction to go. But then I'm going to arbitrarily pick 1985. We should have switched. We said, okay, we may not have the whole pie, but we've got 70% of the pie. Let's start figuring out how to eat the pie. Stop trying to figure out how to get the whole fucking pie. But too many of us collectively as a culture and too many of us collectively as a group are still trying to get more of the pie. It's, well, the police are still this. Yeah, they are. And we're still getting arrested at these rates. Yes, we are. Okay, yes. But you know what? Let's set goals for ourselves. Like, we can literally come together as a community and do the things we need to do to minimize that. And I said, man, wouldn't it be great, in spite of all the shit that's still going on, every minister and influential black leader stopped focusing on the government, and we came up with a 7-year plan. And the 7-year plan would be, in the next 7 years, we're going to reduce our single...
7 or 70?
7. 70 is too long. We could,
Cool.
right?
Just
7.
sure. Dude, I can't think 7 months.
No, in a 7-year plan, we are going to reduce the number of unwed mothers we have. We're going to increase the number of high school graduates and college graduates by this %. We're going to reduce the number of us being incarcerated by this. And think about this as a movement. Even think about it as creating a website that tracked this shit, right? Every month or every 6 months or every quarter, every year, and got everybody to buy in. Now think about how that mother or father is going to engage with their children. Think about that unwed girl who gets pregnant or is thinking about having sex unprotected. Like, wait, I don't want to be the reason we don't hit that goal. I don't want to be, see what I'm saying? Now there's a sense of ownership.
There we go.
In the community that says, in spite of the shit that's still going on, we got a goal we got to make. Because we know, another one I'd have on that is the number of black-owned businesses started, right? So we would have this set of goals in the 7-year plan that at the end of 7 years, we'd want to have, I'm making it, I don't know the numbers, but 1% black-owned business to 5%, right? Black male incarceration from 20% down to 17%. I don't fucking know. But have those, track them, run at them. Now you'll see some change in the black community.
So I want to go down that path, and this is a good turn into DEI. Because I agree with what you're saying. There's a difference in goal setting. So back to power versus force.
Yep.
What is power and what is force? Sorry, I'm going to walk away from my mic. Power is through my words, through my actions, I bring about change.
Yep.
Force is putting things in place that pushes someone to do something.
Yep.
Right? Power has a high level of consciousness. Force has a low level of consciousness. Yep. DEI falls into force, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would
agree with that?
Yeah.
What is your problem with or what is your agreement with, disagreement with, indifference toward DEI?
I don't like DEI if it, using your vernacular, over relies on force. I like DEI
as a goal.
I'm sorry?
As a goal.
No, as awareness.
Okay.
As awareness. I like DEI as a conscious. Ooh, I'm just making this up on the fly. I like DEI as a consciousness. So if I was going to build a DEI inside my company, it's not going to be around making sure we get all these goals. It's more going to be aligned as if we are upside down, why? Right? And let's go fix why we're upside down. So if we fix why we're upside down and we're still not meeting the goal, but we're doing everything right, then in time the goal will be reached, so I'm not worried about it. If we're not doing everything right, then regardless, then we need to fix it. Does that make any sense? So here's why I'm a fan of DEI. I think at any given time, the most people we've had in my company is 10, I think, okay? So I've gone out and I've done speaking or trained sales teams, whatever, where literally I'm in a room of 55, 60 people, 3 women, no minorities, all white males.
Yep.
I'm sorry. That is a problem. And nobody will convince me differently. Do you know how hard it is to do that, in my opinion? I've had, I'm going to guess, I'd have to go back, maybe 30 people come in and out of my company over however period of time, right? Maybe even less than that, if I really think about it. We've had 3 black people, not including myself, probably it's got to be less than 30. Maybe it's like 15 or 20. Doesn't matter. We've had everything. Jewish people, black people, gay people, white male, right-wing Christians, you know what I'm saying? Asian. We've had it all. How the fuck can a company that's probably hired less than 25 or 30 people in rotate? We've had people as young as 20 and old as 60, I think. Do you see my point? There's no way that I can have a team that diverse and you over here with tens, hundreds, thousands of people not diverse. Because if you follow the odds, I should have the one that's almost mostly white, you know what I'm saying? Because there are more white people. And you should have the one that's more diverse by playing the numbers. So this is where I find DEI very important, is awareness. The fact that these companies are this way, in my sorry little ass company, I don't see color. I don't have a lot of the subconscious biases
meritocracy.
Yeah, and I don't have subconscious biases towards anything. So it's easy for all these different people to get into my company. You have subconscious bias, not you, but these companies don't know it, and you just keep hiring people that feel and look like you.
Because here's what a statistic that was alarming, and I'll ask the question. Do you know what percentage of America is white?
I think it's 65.
Yeah, it's about 72 a couple of years ago now, 65. Fortune 100 companies, they did a study on open recs, open jobs
Yep.
in 2022, maybe 23. What percentage of those roles getting filled do you believe fit into minority group? Like of those, let's say there's 100 roles, there's not, it's
What do you mean
100,000.
fit into? I don't understand.
Meaning someone who fits into the category of this checks the box of DEI, right? So someone who is in that category of they're in the diverse minority crowd, right? Does that
I'm
make sense?
confused. No.
Okay. Let's say there's 100,000 roles.
Yeah.
All those roles got filled at the Fortune 100 level.
Oh, how many got filled by a DEI candidate?
Correct.
Okay, I see the question. Oh, I have no idea.
Take a guess. I mean, just curious what you
100% or 80%?
94.
94.
Yeah.
So using that logic, what you're saying is 94% of all the new jobs are going to minorities now?
That is where it went.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
I know. It's just what happened.
Hmm.
So, to my point is, I love, kudos to you, that's a great point. I think DEI as a consciousness is a phenomenal goal for us to have. In fact, it should be a mission. I think that to the force point, so this comes back to, let's go conspiracy for a second. These large organizations are owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, Main Street, et cetera. I don't think that they truly care about ESG scores and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, I think that their goal is power and right. They want to maintain power, and the way they do that is through division, through force, right? Good example. This has nothing to do with DEI necessarily. It has to do with ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance.
Yeah.
Let's take BlackRock, for example. BlackRock is the largest shareholder of Exxon, right? Exxon has a lot of international plants, right? So BlackRock said, in the name of ESG, your ESG score, we're going to ask you to relinquish control of and get rid of all of these in the APAC area, Asia Pacific, all these plants. So you do that, okay, right? You're doing this in the name of, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, environmental in this particular case. Who then took over those plants? PetroChina.
I was going to say it had to be someone in Asia. Yeah.
PetroChina is the Exxon of China.
Okay.
Who is the largest shareholder of PetroChina?
Exxon.
BlackRock.
Oh, BlackRock. Okay, so just move. It's just shell game.
Shell game.
Yeah.
I don't think they give a shit.
No, I don't think so either.
Right. And so to my point though is I think that we are moving away from what I think is the heart of capitalism, which is meritocracy. And we're getting into this place of force where we are forced to do things in order to keep the highest. This is where capitalism eats itself, right?
Yep.
Where I think that it is a movement. It's why I don't trust movements per se. Now when I say movement, I mean like more these social justice movements. I think at the heart of them, the grassroots people that belong to them have extreme empathy. I think the people who start them or use them do not. And so my point is I think we're going down a slippery slope with DEI specifically, where we are overcorrecting in such a way that I think takes away from the heart of what actually solves the problem, which is merit.
I don't necessarily disagree. I don't have evidence to say, like I wouldn't sit in front of someone and argue that.
Yeah.
But if someone tells me in the absence of any additional evidence, I don't disagree. You said it. We're still trying to correct for the sins of our forefathers, and we're trying to figure out how to correct it.
Yep.
I think there are a series of very clear issues that we as a country don't want to address that is magnifying or feeding those missions or those, what do you call them, those movements that are feeding those movements that really shouldn't be feeding those movements, but they're providing fire to them. I think one of them is the criminal justice system.
Yes.
If another person tries to tell me our criminal justice system doesn't need to be addressed, and another person tells me it's not biased to black people, I'm going to fucking throw up. That's one place I get so angry. There's cognitive dissonance for you right there. I mean, come on, man. Like, just stop.
Yep.
So,
I mean, look at our incarceration rate.
Yeah, and look at it as it relates to blacks. I mean, I literally saw someone in Fox the other day, because I watch Fox all the time, say, oh, what's his name? What's the dude who filled in for Tucker?
Not Hannity.
No, he runs that show with the other five, and then he does I think he does the Tucker thing.
I know you're talking about.
Jeremy
I can
or
see him. It might be Jeremy.
Is it Jeremy?
It might
I
be
can
Jeremy.
see his face. But anyways, he literally said, blacks are not incarcerated at a higher rate. Blacks do not get higher sentences. And I was like, okay.
That's not true.
I know. And this is why I was so angry. It's like, I almost feel like I'm watching a movie. Like, and I'm like, you're the devil. Like, literally, this is why I get so angry at something. You can tell I get fired up. How the fuck do you, back to character, back to self-awareness. How in God's fucking name do you honestly in your heart of hearts, knowing we're all Americans,
Yep.
and you talk about, I'm American, I'm a patriot. That's one thing that gets me fired up, because with all due respect, 9 out of 10 patriots couldn't give a fuck about half the country, right? The left is messed up. I get the left messed up, but what we don't do is claim we're patriots and hate half of Americans. To me, that's the biggest contradiction in the world.
Sure.
So this dude sits here and talks about how American he is, and then says that knowing that it's not true, and then knowing the impact it has on the system of blacks being able to move forward.
And I think that comes back to the systemic classism, though, because I think if you look at the incarceration rate of, let's just take Appalachia or rural America, it's actually equal to. So I
the
think
incarceration rate is, but the sentencing against color is not.
That's
so
probably fair. Yeah,
blacks will get a higher sentence for the exact same crime as a white person. Now,
yeah, there's a good example a couple of years ago with a football player at Vanderbilt versus the swimmer at Stanford.
Yeah.
That was fucking retarded.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We still have this all. And look, in many ways, this again, when my black friends don't like me, I at least understand. I don't agree with it, but this country still has this whole thing around the all-American kid or the all-American woman, right? And if you fall into that category,
privilege.
Even if you're broke, like take a broke Appalachian kid who happens to be 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, plays football for the team, but he's a douchebag, right? And he does something fucked up, and then you take that dark-skinned, brother who looks exactly, same height, but he's a brother. You know what's going to happen. And anybody try to argue me not, I'm like, I can't talk to you anymore, right? So, yes, I'm not even sure we're going with that, but yes. It's the same, but it's not entirely the same.
America's an interesting experiment.
Yes.
A very successful one in some ways and a detrimental one in others. America should not exist. And right, like we are not meant to, and I use air quotes for a reason for those who are listening and not watching. We are not meant to operate outside of our culture / race, right? Now, America is a good example of where that can go right and where it can go wrong. But we're still feeling out how do we get through that. And so...
Yeah, I like that.
Right? And so I think let's just say all that is true. Where do we go from here? So this is from my days in inner city. So big heart for inner city, big heart for actually black America. Specifically, I played college football. Most of my team was black. Maybe I assimilated to their culture a little bit more than...
I would have loved to see that.
Let's see, man. Now I live on a 70-acre farm in East Tennessee. Not much diversity here. But I have a big heart there, and I think that the challenge is there's so much broken infrastructure in their communities, to your point, right? Like the sins of our past and so on. How do we get out of that? And so when I went into the inner city, I went to East St. Louis, which is 99.9% black.
Yeah, it's a rough place.
It's not St. Louis, for those who are aware of St. Louis. It's on the other side of the river on the Illinois side. It is the 4 out of the 6 poorest zip codes in the country. Highest crime rate. Them and New Orleans are neck and neck usually, but I think they're higher. Not a good competition to win at. And I went there and I spent time. I worked for a nonprofit. I was in the high school and I was coaching a lot of those players. And I read I would say probably one of the more impactful books I've ever read. Highly suggest. It's faith-based, but the statistics in it are really alarming. But the book's called When Helping Hurts.
Yes. I've heard of it. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So When Helping Hurts, I think that we have gotten to a place where we have helped to the point of it hurting. And I think that this is why I'm a purist when it comes to meritocracy and capitalism. Is the whole premise is it's not handouts, it's hand-ups. So I think that a lot of the legislature or the regulation that has occurred has almost got us to this point where, so in black communities, massive increase. It was, I believe it was single parent households was 22%, somewhere in that range. Someone can check me on that, but it's in the 20s.
Yeah.
Back in, I believe this is the 80s or 70s. When we passed welfare,
Yes, and made the father
Since
move
then,
out.
the single family household is now 70-something% in Black America. And it's actually like that in a couple other communities as well. But a lot of it is because when helping hurts is our goal with welfare was to help.
Yep.
It was to say, let me take care of the single mother who's having children to help take care of those children. Yep. Heart's there. But where it hurts is it has now created an incentive system to not get married and to have more kids and to have more kids born into poverty without parents in the household and family. This is where I want to take the turn to family as well. That, I think, is our problem. I think that we mean well. I think a lot of these movements, even that we've seen pop up over the past 8 years or so, mean well behind it, but I think that they've been hijacked in a lot of ways, and they've actually created a lot more harm than good.
Yeah. Yep. I think some truth to that. I think, yes. Oh, in a macro sense, I completely agree.
Okay.
And I'm not. It's not even an and or a but here. What I would add, and I don't even know I have the exact answer, but I'm going to use this story or this as an example.
Okay.
Did you ever see that?
Get some water.
Yeah. Did you ever see that video where, I don't know, it was a coach or this dude had all these kids stand on a line and they were going to race? He said, I got $100 to the first person that can.
I saw this.
Right? So for all those of you
who
who
was
see
born
it,
in with a dad.
yes.
Yeah.
So there's all these kids, maybe 100 kids or 75 kids lined up on a line side by side for a race. And he says, all right, I'm going to give $100. The first person to me gets $100. So everybody get ready. He goes, but before we do that, every single person whose parents are still married, take one step forward. And they said, everybody whose parents, who never had to worry about a food or anything, take a step forward.
Yep.
And for everybody who got their parents paid for college, take a step forward. For everybody who had their first car bought, take a step forward. And so what he started doing was laying out all of these things that some kids got. And how he said is, once he was done, he goes, all right, so now you guys see where you are. And so there was a handful of kids who were easily 10 yards in front of the other kids, right? Leave race out of it, right? There were kids who were easily 10 yards out in front. And he said, so all of you who are in the front row had nothing to do with the decision you made.
Starting line.
Your starting line is way ahead of these guys and had nothing to do with you, not your talent, not your skill, not your hard work. So to your point, I agree with what you're saying. What I would like to add, though, is if we're going to start fixing, I think we need to fix that, right? I think we need to fix, back to this idea of assessment, where is the line jacked up because of these things, and what can the government do, or regulation, I don't mean handouts, but how do we fix that so that not do I have to give everybody a car, that's not where I'm going, but what are some of the things that are contributing to this, and how can we create opportunities for people to make decisions that make it easier for them to make those decisions to help their children or that situation better. Because look, we'll talk about this and we can switch and come back to it because you and I could probably spend the next 8 hours on all this social stuff, right? But let me really mess people up. And I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm going to be love to hate after this, but oh well. White privilege. Do you believe in white privilege?
I believe in class privilege.
Okay, knowing I'm 56 years old, I'll be 56 in April. Knowing I'm 56, do you believe in white privilege?
Yes.
Okay, great answer. So I was adopted by a white family in 1968 when I was 8 months old. Okay. My maternal grandfather was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Called him WASP because it was a bad thing back in the day. I don't mean to offend anybody, but he was white Anglo-Saxon. And if anybody's read Max Weber's Protestant Ethic, he was the quintessential Protestant.
Okay.
He was Scottish in English, I believe. His last name was Haynes. My grandmother was also Scottish. They were married. They were a little different, and they got married when they're in their early 30s. So right before the Depression, right, like 1929 to 28 or something. They got married, which is rare. And most people got married in the early 20s, right? My grandmother went to college, rare, right? Grandfather went to college. My grandfather was the general manager of the B&M Railroad, which is the big railroad in Boston that connects all the suburbs, right? It's called the Boston and Maine. So he bought a new car every 4 years, but it only had an AM radio. He was extremely frugal, right? He had the same watch on his wrist from like 1920-something till he couldn't read it anymore, and he couldn't drive, and I took him and my grandmother to Service Merchandise where he got a Timex. I'm going to get emotional. I actually wore it when I got married, right? So this is a man who had this amazing life because he was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? My dad's side of the family, my adopted family, he was Catholic. Now, they had 7 kids, right? My grandfather was a steel worker, but they were a good middle-class family, right? Yeah. But what's interesting about this is because they were white and were able to live the American dream, when my grandfather, my maternal side, died, he had money. Like, he was a millionaire, but after taking care of my grandmother, he died like 8 years before my grandmother, so he kept her in her house. She didn't have to go into a home. I remember they had a private equity banker, so they had, you know what I'm saying? So he probably spent another $500,000 taking care of my grandmother when he was dead. So when he died, my point is he had just under $1 million to spread amongst the family. My mom had already passed his daughter, so it came to me, my brother, and sister directly. Okay. I used that money to buy a house. See what I'm doing here? I used that money to buy a house. That house created wealth for me, right? They gave me money when I went to college to help get through college, right? So they were a support. Why? Because he was able to be the general manager of the B&M Railroad. Had I not been adopted, my dad was black, born in 1938. What advantages do you think my dad could have given me?
Not many.
None. Yep. So I don't belabor people, or I don't get angry at people for having, like, I don't think you have white privilege and I'm the bad guy and all. Sure. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a fact. And I as a black person benefited from white privilege. You don't understand how lucky I believe I am that I was able to benefit from fucking white privilege. And guess who's benefiting from it now?
Your kids.
My kids. My kids all go to a ski school. They ski all fucking morning. You know what I'm saying? They compete all over the state and all over the country in skiing. There's a cascading effect.
Sure.
Most, not all, but most black kids born in the 60s aren't where I am. Now, of course, some are. Absolutely, some figured it out, whatever, but not where I am. That was white privilege. So that's simply my point, is that we got to figure out a way to help start to break that generational change and stop passing it on.
Yeah, there's a statistic in, I believe it was When Helping Hurts. It might have been in there, or maybe it was in one of Du Bois' works. See, I'm read up.
Wow, man.
I'm read up. I think it was When Helping Hurts. So he talks about the statistic of a black American moving in from lower class to middle class. Statistically speaking, when hardship comes, goes back to lower class at a higher clip than white people. That's what you're talking about. But you asked me, does white privilege exist? Yes. 2 questions there. Does it still exist to the same extent? And on what time horizon spectrum does white privilege no longer exist? Because what I'm getting at is take America out of it, go to any other culture ever, right? Let's go to the Ming Dynasty or something. There were people who in the Ming Dynasty were born in, let's say Roman, it's more recent. Roman Empire, people born into poverty, go into middle class, work their way up into upper class, right? And so you might say, whatever maybe it was Catholicism, it was like Catholic privilege or something, right? At some point, you make it down the road and you get to middle, then upper class, you've now changed the trajectory of your generation.
Yes.
Correct,
yes.
right? And so at what point does Catholic privilege fall off and it's now part of the genealogy of where you're at on this longer time horizon? When does that privilege fall off? Because I don't disagree with you. White privilege in the 30s and 40s, to the point of your parents, 100%, like the most privileged in probably history of the world. But if you go into nowadays, I'm asking, do you believe white privilege is less? And are we further down the time horizon to where naturally we are getting away from it?
I believe it's less. Of course it's less. I think if you think that white privilege is the same as it was in the 70s and 60s and was the same as it was in the 30s and 40s and then in the 1800s, you're an idiot. Of course it's less.
Sure.
To your question, I don't think it ever goes away.
Sure.
I think human nature is as such that whoever is the majority has the privilege. Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden, at the rate things are going, America transitions to more Hispanics. And
immigration, it probably will.
Yeah, and the Hispanics
which that's
are
a shit show we could talk
more
about.
often the presidents, and the Hispanics are more often in positions of power. And they're more. I mean, I don't see this happening, but it could. And they happen to be more of the people who run the CEOs of the Fortune 500 and the whatever. Then there's going to be Hispanic privilege, right? Unless we get to a place where the world is completely colorblind or whatever. And I'd like to think we will someday, but So this idea of privileges never goes away. I think the real question is, does it get to the point, regardless of whether it's, let's say, females, all of a sudden, look, if I could snap my finger right now, I'd put women in charge of everything. In charge of everything. The male experiment, in my opinion, is done. It's failed. Next up, ladies, see what you can do. But anyways, I digress. So I don't think we'll ever get rid of privilege, because whoever the majority is in power, they're going to sort of have that. The question really is, when is it not big enough to worry about? Mm-hmm. And I would like to think that we're probably a generation out. So I think my kids, white privilege or any type of privilege will still be there, but not to the point that it needs to be a discussion. Okay. Right? I think we're close. I think we have to accept a few things to get there, but I think we're pretty close. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the point I'm trying to make is that, and maybe this is as a privileged white individual, I can say this. I think we need to stop focusing on race.
So I agree. I agree. But do me a favor. Define what that means, because I'm not going to not focus on your Christianity. And if I'm talking to a Jewish, I'm not going to not focus. Like, that's who you are. Like, I'm going to celebrate that. Like, yeah. Right? So I conceptually understand when people say that, but in practice, I don't.
What I mean by it is replacing merit.
Okay, no. Well, full on. But isn't the reason we're here is because we weren't using merit?
No. Oh, yes.
Oh, I was like, wait, what did I miss? The whole reason we're here is because we haven't used merit in our entire history. Now, okay, you and I can debate. Maybe we started in the 90s, 80s. Sure. But can we be honest? Can we be honest as honest? We have not been a merit-based society for any longer than a maximum of about 30 years. And even then, I could argue it's not even 30 years, but I'm going to be nice, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what people have a hard time getting is, I agree with you. I want meritocracy. And everyone says, we need to get back to merit. The reason the pendulum is swinging is because the entire country was not built on meritocracy. It was built on meritocracy for white males. Mm-hmm. Not for women, not for Asians, not for blacks, not for Jews. You see what I'm saying? So yes, I'm in full agreement. I want meritocracy too, but I think you're seeing the pendulum swing because we haven't had it, and people are like, well, how are we defining that now?
Yes. It's hard, and the reason I say we don't focus on race is I think there's far more things we should be focusing on, right?
Okay.
Race, there should be no difference in merit.
Agreed, 100%.
Gender is a different conversation, in my opinion. Let's go there.
I'm just trying to figure out in what regard. If we're talking on the physical attributes on a football field or something, well, yeah, it's different.
Sure.
But as far as mind and capabilities, and I see no difference in gender between men and women, the ability to run a company or to run the government, I don't see a difference.
Skill set wise, no.
Okay.
Biology wise, yes.
But how does that biology play out in the skill set?
My wife is incredibly talented. Uh-huh. My wife has a guttural internal DNA wired in her that she does not have an ambition towards running a company.
Okay.
And so I believe, and I could be wrong, and some of it is our past, I believe it is more difficult for a female to ascend to the highest ranks because I don't think that categorically, quantifiably, there are as many people that make it that far because biologically they step out and go into motherhood, which I believe is a calling that's far more important than what you and I fucking do on a day-to-day basis, in my opinion.
So I see the argument. I can understand the argument. I don't know that I have enough data to buy into the argument. So I'm not going to take a hard stand on this.
Okay.
But what I will share with you is how I break it down.
Okay.
I believe that there are social norms.
Yes.
That drive women to that place. So basically what I'm hearing, the way I'm breaking this down is nature versus nurture. Yeah. You're suggesting that nurture plays a heavy role in women having the drive or desire, want to run a company or be president or whatever, versus nature. I think it's more nature. And that's why I'd like to snap my finger and make women run the world, because then we'd see that nature shift. And this is one piece of data that I would use for this. If you've ever seen the movie Misrepresentation, like MISS, it's a I don't call it documentary, but whatever you call it, documentary, or it's whatever, on women and how media and society drive their thinking and create, the impact, we'll go with that, the impact that media and society has on women. Yep. And one of the things they said, this was fascinating. As a dude, I was like, no way. I'm going to butcher the age, but it doesn't matter. When surveyed or asked, boys and girls alike who are under 12 say that they want to grow up and be president at almost the exact same number. Okay. It shifts to like 3-1 after 10 or 11 or 12. Okay. So what that tells me and what they argue is it's the messages we send to girls in society. Be a mother, you're supposed to be pretty, sex. They talked a lot about the message of sex. Back to that girl who's a great skier, right? Yep. I don't think that's in her DNA. To your point, I think she's responding to what society says they value a woman for. And she's like, I got an Instagram profile, I'm pretty good looking, and I ski, I'm going to get paid for this. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I tend to believe that women have just as much drive and just as much inclination to be in power as men, but society over time chips away at that. And as a father of 3 girls, I see it.
I'm a traditionalist. I'm sure you can guess. My wife stays at home. She stayed at home for 8 years now. Mm-hmm. Now I've afforded her the ability to do that, and so we are a partnership in that sense. Yep. My wife has, like I mentioned, an ambition as a mother. Yep. Right. So this is what I'm getting at mostly, is I think, again, we think too binary. Yep. We put CEO, executive, high earner in a more elevated place in society now. And so to the contrary, I think that my wife gets more shame now online for wanting to be a stay-at-home mom and addressing her. I know it's fucked up, but it's what it is, right? A lot of the shit we've been talking about is fucked up.
That's fucked up.
And so that's why I think that nature versus nurture, whatever it might be, you're saying it's a message. I think that's a victim mentality. But I also think it's not untrue, right? Given that cop-out. I think it is both and. And that's why I'm so anti-binary nowadays, is because I think that we have elevated, maybe this is pendulum swinging, elevated female in leadership as opposed to elevating female in motherhood leadership, right? And I think that we are saying it's a messaging thing versus I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's more DNA and more in our, when my son, my 3.5-year-old, screams his head off, I'm pretty unfazed. Mm-hmm. When he screams his head off with my wife, there's some sort of internal mother instinct that doesn't allow that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is a biological difference that we should celebrate. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that we need to be looking at equality in the same way, right? So that's more or less what I'm getting at, is that I think the problem with our world is a lot of things you talk about: identity, self-awareness, accountability. But I think it's also this binary thinking we have where we are elevating certain things over other things, and we are shaming people for the path that they take.
Yeah, on both sides.
On both sides.
100%. So I'm not a fan of shaming at all, right? So I'm going to make you chuckle. I'm a traditionalist as well. Okay. But not a gender traditionalist. Okay. So I'm a traditionalist that I think someone should stay home with the kids. Okay. I don't give a fuck who it is. Okay. That's the difference for me. Like, I absolutely do.
Mother or father.
Yep. I absolutely do not think that both parents should be working and the kids should be dumped in daycare. I mean, no disrespect for those who can't afford it. So I know how that came out. But if I had my way, every family should have one person who stays home full time. But as far as gender, I don't give a fuck. So this is this is why I consider myself a liberal, right? Like, we get too caught up in labels, man. Mm-hmm. And to your point, roles. I don't think roles are gender specific. I believe in roles. I believe we need CEOs, we need moms, we need dads, we need coaches, we need supporters, we need leaders. Like, I love roles. Who the fuck is in them? Don't give a shit. Back to your point, meritocracy, best person. Best person. There was a family. I mean, I can think of tons of families, but there's 2 right off the top of my head when my kids were young, because that's who you remember when your kids are young, right? And 2 of them had stay-at-home dads. Mm-hmm. The woman was a doctor, I think an orthopedist, but I can't remember, but full-on doctor. Like, and I don't mean to say it's fucked up, but I mean doctor, right? Which we don't we always assume is men. So she had full doctor, full practice. She worked her ass off. He stayed home and raised the 2 daughters.
Sure.
It was fucking awesome. Had another buddy. He stayed home, tried a little selling, but basically stayed home and raised the daughters. His wife had this whole big business on creating events, giant sales events, right? She was an event planner. So I don't give a shit. So that's from someone stay home, someone work. But as far as the gender is concerned, I think we overplay this idea of gender. And I think I raised my girls as best I could gender neutral. Okay. And what I mean by that is I never said they weren't girls, right? I never acknowledged they weren't girls.
You have to caveat that now.
Yes. Yeah, I do. But what I did is I said, you don't have to wear pink. You don't have to wear a dress.
Sure.
Like there's no rules to being a girl. And so my girls had Barbies, but they also had trucks. I mean, my girls all are super athletes, right? I mean, we go to a ski school. I got to pay extra money and they all compete in skiing, right? I made them carry their skis when they were 3 years old. I still remember we had the little the Green Army men around and dinosaurs around and they would set them all up. And so my point in this, I was very, very, very deliberate in not raising my girls under this idea that this is a girl and this is a boy.
Got it.
And my wife got mad. Said, "What are you doing? You're dressing like..." But I'm not dressing them like fucking anything, right? I didn't go so far as take them to the boys section and say wear that. You know what I'm saying? But if it was easier with unisex things like skiing. They saw a cool ski jacket. It didn't have fur on it. It wasn't all pink. I was like, this is dope. Go with it. Let's roll. And so if you meet my daughters now, they have probably some of the most balanced, strong individual personalities you've ever seen. And they're all beautiful, which is awesome, but sucks, right? They're all beautiful. And they're very feminine, but they're not feminine in the sense that they're following some label. You see what I'm saying? And they don't lead with their looks, right? I mean, my oldest had her first boyfriend, again, beautiful girl, 5'10". They're all fit because I'm skinny as a rail too, so it is whatever. Biggest smile you've ever seen.
Privilege.
Yeah, that's genetic privilege. That's never going to go away. But she didn't get her first boyfriend until she was 8 because she just wasn't interested. You know what I'm saying? My second one, she's almost 5'10", 5'10 and a half, even more fit like me, legs are as long as mine, and she hasn't had a boyfriend yet because she just doesn't feel a need for a boyfriend. She's too busy with her friends. She's got a 4.4 average. She's too busy with skiing. She's out there doing backflips on a mogul course. You see what I'm saying? So I know it's a very long answer, but no, I don't subscribe to gender-specific roles. I subscribe to roles and being the fucking best you can be for whatever role fits you.
I think what it comes back to the president of the United States by 11 or 12, 3-1 difference, right? That's where I'm coming from. More so as I think that there is a nature inside that doesn't, I'm not saying it doesn't allow. There's obvious, I mean, what's her face?
Hillary Clinton. Nikki Haley.
Yeah, Nikki Haley. So I'm thinking about.
Tons of women have done it. Meg Whitman.
They're starting to do it, right? So it's not a binary thing. However, I do think that there is a nature aspect of, in their nature, I think that people tend to step out, which is why I think that we do see less representation in business.
You should go watch that movie because I wish I'd watch it.
Yeah, I'm going to go watch it.
Because they show a lot of data that.
So misrepresentation?
Yeah, MISS.
What was that? You mentioned Protestant something book?
Protestant Ethic, Max Weber. You're not going to want to read that. I read it in college, and it's not an easy read.
Cliff notes.
At all. Yeah, it is not an easy read.
Cool.
But the general premise was pretty cool.
Love it. Okay.
The simple general premise on Protestant Ethic was it compared Protestantism to Catholicism, and the general premise is Protestant teaches that heaven is on earth for all intent and purposes and how you maximize your experience here, where Catholics said that your reward or privilege comes when you die, and then they take those general premises and play them out and look at Protestant countries with Catholic countries and how they don't do as well in capitalism, how they don't do as well as in many of the elements you use to describe a successful country versus an unsuccessful country. And it's fascinating when you look at most of South America, you look at Spain, you look at Italy, then you compare that to Germany, England, to a certain degree France, which is kind of on the cusp of both. It's like, whoa! Interesting thesis, right? Mm-hmm. Like America's primarily Protestant. And you look at their prosperity in comparison to those that were Catholic, and it's a fascinating book. Anyways,
let's go down that path. I was going to go family, but we can come back. That's an easy one to come back to. Spirituality. Where do you fall?
Define spirituality. You ask me religion, or you ask me spirituality?
Spirituality.
I'm personally not very spiritual.
Okay.
I mean,
let's go back. Let's take it even 30,000 foot. What is spirituality then?
I guess a belief in something.
Okay.
You know, and maybe we could
outside
go
of or greater than
outside of ourselves.
Okay.
I don't personally really believe in a spirit outside of myself. I guess, I mean, other than maybe just the common collection of humanity, I guess. So I guess it's kind of like a butterfly, you know, flaps its wings and what happens somewhere else? Like,
yeah.
What's that phrase?
A tree falls or some
yeah,
shit.
Yeah. So
I don't know. Don't check me on that.
Yeah,
LinkedIn or
but
YouTube.
yeah, I know the first part. A butterfly flaps its wings and something really, really big happens.
Earthquake.
Somewhere else.
I think it's earthquake. Yeah.
Right. So that's my level of spirituality. And if anybody follows me around and can get into my head and sees past the imperfections, that's kind of my value system. Like, I know that if I can do the right thing or I can make the right decision for myself and then for somebody else, the downstream effect of that is pretty huge. So that's about as far as I go. I don't believe in something else, pulling the strings or making things happen or a creator. And I mean, no disrespect to you or anybody else.
You're good, bro.
But I personally just don't believe.
You believe in consciousness?
I'm sorry?
You believe in consciousness? Not like coherency, but like being conscious.
I think so. Isn't that what we started the conversation off with today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I'm not trying to steer you one way or the other because I actually don't have an answer personally. This is more curiosity.
No, I love the challenge me away. I'm never offended.
There's
by
no challenge. I'm more
Oh.
a question. It's more of a.
So yes, I believe in conscious. I believe that's what I was talking about earlier. We need to be more conscious.
Where would you say consciousness began?
For me, or in general?
In general.
So, I think consciousness. Okay, this is deep. I've actually given
Welcome
this
to
some
Empty
thought.
the Clip.
I've actually given this some thought.
Okay.
Now, again, this is just my opinion, just my thought. So if other people have information, put in the comments or wherever they can talk to us, hit me up. I believe consciousness is the thing that differentiates man from animals. Okay? Now, again, without evidence, I'm starting to feel like there are certain animals that also have consciousness of their existence, and I feel like killer whales in particular.
Okay.
And maybe a couple others, but again, I'm way over my skis here. But based on some of the behaviors I've seen with killer whales and how they work together and some of the things they do, maybe some primates have consciousness. But for the most part, I believe the 99.9% of the animal kingdom does not have consciousness. And so what I mean by that is, do you remember when you were 2 months old?
No.
Do you remember when you were 6 months old?
Nope.
Somewhere around 1.5 or 2, you might have your first memory, right? And maybe full-fledged consciousness came around maybe 3, 4, I don't know. Different for everybody. But almost everybody I talked to, we all agree we weren't conscious at 6 months, 8 months, right? But we had feelings. Like, if I snapped you, you're going to cry, right? Yeah. If I leave you, you feel alone, you're scared. So you have all of these emotions in that moment, that fleeting moment, but you can't connect to it or anticipate it, right? So you have very little vision onto what just happened and what's going to happen next. Am I making any sense? So I believe the majority of the world doesn't have that consciousness. Humans have it, and I believe it comes in and starts building, not overnight, but gradually, starting around 18 months to 2 years, up to about 4, and then it's it's conscious, right? I believe that is a mutation to the ecosystem of the earth.
Okay.
And I believe that mutation is turned into a cancer. If you believe that the earth's existence is supposed to be symbiotic and everything works together to keep the earth going, that consciousness has undermined that symbiosis.
Okay.
And so I don't know where it comes from or how it happened, but I just think it was a mutation of the brain, probably driven by the need to survive. Like if, again, I know you're Christian, but if you believe in evolution, I believe that there was a mutation. One or handful of humans were born with a little more awareness. That awareness allowed me, I know what's going to happen here, right? So they stayed in or they backed off with the other right? Like example. It doesn't matter. You get my point. So that's my answer. So I don't know where it came from. I think it's a mutation that only humans have for the most part, and the rest of the animal kingdom doesn't. and it's got to take care of itself eventually.
But where does it come from?
Have no idea.
That's the
I
question.
think it's a mutation. I literally think it's a mutation, like anything else. Where does speed come from? Like where did whales come from? Like I just think it's all. I think in this case, it's a mutation, no different than the finch's beak.
Here's where scientists can't understand this, right? So there's space matter,
Yep.
right? They've talked. That's now like a doomed theory kind of thing, in terms of consciousness, because something has to come from something, right?
Okay.
Right, to some degree, right? So you can argue two microbes ran into each other and created a big bang or whatever.
Yeah.
But did those two microbes have consciousness? And if so, where did that consciousness come from? And so, again, I don't have answers, right? So you said I'm a Christian. I would historically say I have been a Christian. I'm now in a place of there's 10,000 religions, 4,000 denominations within Christianity alone. So none of us are right if we're arrogant to say we are.
Yeah.
But consciousness comes from it has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just
But
pop
does
out.
it?
I don't know. If it does, where from?
So I think this is where I struggle, and this is why I just let the faithful have it, because it's not that important to me to have it. I believe that statement that something has to come from somewhere is a rhetorical, infinite statement. Because think about it, if something has to come from somewhere, that is, I'm sure there's a big scientific term, but that is an impossible statement.
Correct.
If something has to come from somewhere, that is an infinite statement.
Correct.
And because that means there was no beginning, and if there was no beginning, then something always was, and now that statement isn't true.
Now it's God.
Yeah,
or whatever you call God.
But take that very thesis and say, what created God? Like, where did God come from?
That's the whole thing. It's fucked up. It's
Yes.
so trippy.
Yes. So I don't subscribe. But again, other people can't. I don't have to have that belief system. It's well beyond my consciousness, and I'm okay leaving it alone. Other people need that answer. I don't.
100%. I get that. It was more of a question line because we're all existential beings to some degree. And so it's an evolutionary conversation. I'm having internal dialogue and external people.
Dude, we can look it up. But I want to say something like, 22 trillion planets? Something like that?
It's insane.
Right? So and again, I guess this is where my faith comes in. I don't need to know this answer. Like
everybody has faith.
Yeah, this is way too out for me. But when you talk about 22 trillion planets and something like 7 or 8 billion galaxies, and
when you start thinking about the infiniteness of space, it's fucked.
Yes.
It's terrifying.
So granted, there could be people on not people, living things as we define it, on millions of planets, but still millions of trillions is the tiniest thing in the world. So when I start trying to figure out something must start from something, I stop there. I'm like, using the Christian version or the Jewish version or the Islamic version, really? This thing felt it needed to create 22. I'm sorry to laugh. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but
it's not disrespectful, bro.
It's funny as fuck. This thing said I need to create 22 trillion planets, right, with nothing on them, so that I could focus on that one.
Are you going to retire?
What?
Are you ever going to retire?
No.
Or you think you'll always build?
No. I mean, I guess it depends how you determine retire.
Yeah.
But no, I'll always be.
One day you'll cease to exist and you'll have to. But
yeah,
it won't be a conscious choice.
No.
My point is you're a creator, you're a builder.
Yeah, I got to do something.
And so my point is I think our creation comes from a creator. So our desire to create comes from us being created, from a creator of some sort, right? Now, where I subscribe that to religion-wise, I don't have a religion currently. But this is where I'm starting to think a little bit more. I'm just talking out loud, so I like this. We can go back and forth on it. But I do think that to the point of the 22 trillion, but let me back up. This is fucking cool. How many, you're not even going to guess it, but the other day I was curious on what is the estimated amount of insects on Earth. This is where I get fucking trippy, but this is funny. 10 quintillion.
I guess that makes sense when you think about it. And that's down probably by 80% in the last 100 years.
Yes. So what's interesting about that, this is just the infiniteness of all things, right? Yeah. So when you think about insects.
Wow, quintillion.
I'm so sorry.
Whoever's watching this. I love this shit. I'm fascinated.
So 10 quintillion, what that equates to is if it would essentially mean that for every human being on Earth, called 8 billion, there is somewhere in the billions of insects per human being on Earth. So like the infiniteness of all the things created is insane. But to the point of 22 trillion galaxies or planets or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I believe there is an infinite being up there to whom we might call God or universe or whatever, that similar to you and I, we don't ever want to stop creating. Mm-hmm. There is an infinite creator who continues to create. Mm-hmm. And that's where it becomes more of an awe, right? So talk about reverence. There's an awe about it of like, man, there is something created all of this, it's just mind-blowing. It also makes you feel pretty small and insignificant, which is also why you should just live your life and do what you want to do, right? To some degree, without hurting people and so on. But the only answer you can come to is there is something outside of our comprehension. And to your point, why would he focus just on Earth? He maybe doesn't. Uh-huh. You know Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah, of course. Love that dude.
He's so interesting. He's so weird in some ways. We're all weird, right? We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
Therefore, none of us are weird.
Yeah.
Unless we're programmed into our default, then we're not so weird. But he talks about parallel universes or because the question is there another planet out there, like Earth?
Yeah.
He's like, well, mathematics, blah, 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 however he talks. He's like, not only do I think there's another planet, I think there's another planet that has another you on it, and not just another you that has, there's so many infinite versions of you that the exact same outcome that we're all living in this world right now exists somewhere else. And that started to fuck with my head a little bit.
That's trippy.
It's trippy.
Yes, that's trippy.
Anyways, funny conversation, but it's an existential one for sure. Mm-hmm. Let's go into parenting. We'll come down to bring it back to our little creation. What's your view on parenting?
I got a lot of opinions on this one.
I know it was one of your favorite topics you want to talk about, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I think a lot of our problems today come back to the family unit.
And go all the way back to where we started this thing is the lack of self-awareness as a parent, right? And as an individual, if you don't have self-awareness of yourself, then how do you actually do a good job of parenting? Because what we do is we pass part of ourselves onto our children. But if I'm not fully aware of who I am and I'm not deliberate in the person I built,
what are you passing on?
What do you think I'm passing on? Right?
Programming.
Yeah. So I think simple-wise, to start this conversation off, parenting is about teaching children to be independent and teaching them how to build their own identity.
I love that.
And it's not protecting.
Self-awareness combined with intentionality.
Yep.
Is what I look at.
Yep.
Is I think that there's what has happened in our world, I believe, is the deterioration of the family.
Oh, yeah. No question.
And I think that most of our problems go back to that. I think there's an aspect of, and I have so much empathy for people who don't have a family. We kind of went to my background, right? Ex-opioid addict, and you asked if I had, my parents were there or whatever, if I had a traumatic, and the answer is no, right? But what I think was lacking then, that I think that they have evolved as humans since then, which I really, really respect, is I think there's an aspect of letting the child be programmed by the default of the world.
Yes.
And I think, because to your point, we are all programmed. Mm-hmm. Whether we are programmed by our environment, by our community and our culture, by our parents, we all have a programming, whether we want to admit it or not. And so I think it is the duty, the highest calling of humanity, I believe, for those who are at least called into parenthood or bringing children, because not everybody can. So I'm not going to say it's a better calling than them. I think it is one of the greatest callings on Earth in the universe, the 22 trillion planets, to shepherd the hearts of our young people.
100,000%.
And I think that this is why I have a problem with, I'll just go there. It's going to be controversial as fuck. Black Lives Matter, the movement.
Okay.
I don't like it.
Okay.
I like the heart. I think Black lives do matter. I think equality, start lines, et cetera, all the things there. But one of their core tenets was the destruction of the nuclear family on their website.
Yeah, I don't know what the driver behind that is, and I have absolutely I don't support it, but I would want to know their definition before I get behind that. I want to understand what they mean by that. So if they mean the celebration if they mean a binary celebration of the 2-parent household with 2.5 kids versus a single mother with 4 kids, and that one's not a family and that one is, and I would agree with them, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's
so. I just want to make sure, because that definition matters to me. If that's the definition, that they're both families, but we don't celebrate this one as a family, then I'm on board. If it's this is wrong, like the 2-family household in the traditional sense of marriage is wrong, then no, I don't agree with that.
No, I think it's more about, it's interesting because this is actually in the Black community, Black America, like especially when I was in East St. Louis, I noticed there weren't many families, and so it was people tend to be brought up in more of a communal aspect, and so they're saying more of the destruction of the nuclear and more towards there should be a communal aspect, which I think is fucked up because that is where we're talking about programming, right? If we rely on a community to raise someone, now there's circumstances where that's far the better alternative to not, right? But I think if our aim is to destroy and or rid ourselves of this nuclear unit, I think that we're already on the slippery slope, but it's gonna accelerate. It's just gonna keep doing this, and it's just gonna be real fast.
No, look, I don't think there's anything controversial about saying that. I buy into the community aspect, but I don't think it's, once again, this whole concept of binary. It shouldn't be and get rid of the nuclear family. I believe 1,000% in the community aspect of raising kids, but I look at it as family A, B, C, D, E, all in the same community, and I have this pod, and then circling that pod is the community. Like when I was a kid, if I did something wrong and Mr. Jones yelled at me, my parents didn't go over and yell at Mr. Jones, right? Like parents were able to parent other kids, right? We all trusted that if I'm doing something fucking stupid, Mr. Jones doesn't have to call me and let me take care of it. Mr. Jones come at me. No, he couldn't hit me. But come on, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah. Right? And Mr. Jones was allowed to play an authoritarian role. Teachers were allowed to play authoritarian role. So from that perspective, we'd absolutely see a decline in the community. And I completely agree with BLM. We need to bring the community back. Right? This idea, look, parents are fucking up their kids. Let's not even blame this on the kids. Let's keep this real clear. Real clear. Parents are completely screwing up the kids. And every problem I'll put it this way. You want to know what's wrong with a society and the kids? Look at the parents. Kids didn't grow up and say, I want a trophy. Parents who couldn't feel good about the fact that their son or daughter was hurt or upset they didn't get a trophy, went and complained to the sports administration in their town, went and complained to the little soccer league, went and complained to somebody. Enough parents did it, and guess what they did? To get the parents off their asses out of giving trophies to everybody. Now, we as parents are running around saying, I'm sick of trophies for these kids. These kids are soft. Well, then fucking look in the mirror, asshole. Like, the kids of today are the result of the parents of today. The kids are not at fault. And our society has completely flipped that script and try to blame the kids. What's wrong with millennials? Look in the mirror, asshole. Right? What's wrong with these Gen Zs? Look in the mirror, asshole. They are a result of how you raised them, collectively and individually. So, no, I agree with both of those. We need the traditional family, big time. And what I mean by that is parents that love their kids. They can be divorced and go back and forth. It can be a single mom. It can be mom and dad married. Obviously, ideally, I'd like them to stay married, but shit, I'm divorced. Who am I, right? But it's traditional to me is 2 parents that love their children in their children's lives, regardless of the legal concept of marriage or where they live or whatever. That's it. And then wrap around that a community of people who respect each other, love each other, and take care of each other in that community. You need them both.
On that participation trophy culture we've created, what's your opinion on failure, hardship?
You got to have it. You got to have it. If you're not, look, man, you give me a basketball. Let's say I had never seen one in my entire life. And you give me a basketball, or I don't give a shit what it is, but just give me a basketball and you say, get it up there. Or give me a golf club and a golf ball, never seen this in my life, and you say, get it in that hole. And I'll give you $50,000 if you get it in that hole. The first thing I want to do is throw the ball or hit the ball to see what happens. I have no expectation at all that I'm actually going to get it in. Does that make any sense?
100%.
I have zero expectation because I have no fucking idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to wait and calculate because I'm like, fuck this. What happens? Woof. Oh, okay. That happened. Let me try that again. Oh, that happened. Okay. Let me try that again. every one of those failures brings me closer to getting my $50,000. We've lost sight of that. People think that you're not supposed to fail if failure is a bad thing. I'd argue fail, because that gets you closer. You learn what not to do, what worked, what didn't work. You cannot be successful, period, without failure.
What did you noticed something about me when we first got together? What'd you say? We were sitting there at the coffee shop.
Oh, that you're a quiet dude?
Yeah, I'm more mellowed out.
Yeah, and I'm not.
That's true.
Yeah, I said you're a pretty mellow dude, but I said you can see you have a fire in you, but you're just kind of a mellow dude.
Yeah, a lot of it, and this has a point for failure, is my whole mentality in life has evolved to this point of it is not good, it is not bad, it just is. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have gotten to the point in our culture, in our society, in our businesses where we cannot take failure because we deem it as bad.
Yeah, 100%.
And so again, back to fucking binary. We have created this environment where there's a binary outcome here. It's either a good outcome or a bad outcome. Yep. When in actuality, what I would say is, when I say it's not good, it's not bad, it just is failure or victory is data.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Yep.
Now, like we talked about before, there's my kid getting leukemia and dying. Mm-hmm. There could be good that comes from that down the road, but I would never be able to see that, right?
Yeah.
So that would be bad, right? But it's still data for creating my being in the future, and so that would be deemed as good. And so I think that we need to get to the place. It's funny because it's like we're looking for one answer for all these problems we have in our life, yeah. And there is no singular answer. Again, no binary answer. But I think we have to get to the point where we say failure is data for your future version of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a saying, maximize your failure ROI. So if you're going to fail, what you're going to do, get the absolute most out of it you can. But if you're running from failure, afraid of failure, when you do, you're going to run from it, which means you're not going to pick up all of the things that are going to prevent that from happening again. You're not going to pick up all the learnings that will help you get to where you want to go. Yep. So I say, if you're going to fail, lean all the way into that sucker and maximize your failure ROI. Right?
I love that.
Maximize
failure
your
ROI.
Failure ROI.
That's good.
Look, I think too, I like what you said about this idea of it's failure is bad and success is good. Mm-hmm. I like how you said that, but I flip it. To your point, I guess to my story about the basketball and get it in, and I'm going to just throw it to figure it out. If by chance I get it on the first one, that was not success.
Correct.
Because, okay, I won the $50,000, and I guess you could say if I'm never touching a basketball again and walking away, okay, in that definition, that was success. But if the idea was to get me to actually learn how to shoot a basketball, I didn't learn a fucking thing.
Yep.
Right? It went in, so the fuck what? But I didn't learn a thing. And you see this a lot with entrepreneurs who got lucky on their first run.
Yes.
Whatever particular reason, they got lucky. Not to say you didn't work hard, right? But it just so happened their first one fucking was a home run. And they have all the resources in the world, and they're crushing it, and they go start another one. It fails, and it fails again, because they didn't learn what failure was, right?
And then their identity gets checked.
Right? So, yeah, man, no. And just because you fail on the first time doesn't mean it's a failure or it's bad. Just because you succeed doesn't mean it's good. I've seen failure on the first one be the greatest thing in the world, and I see success on the first one be the biggest failure in the world. Or bad, I should say. So, yeah, no, I like where you were going with that.
Where do goals matter?
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
That
shows progress, but that doesn't matter the most. I'm a big fan of mastery. Big fan of mastery. The journey. My daughter, so I have all three daughters, love them to death. They're all competitive skiers. However, currently my youngest is legitimately on a path to make the U.S. ski team.
It's incredible.
And potentially go to the Olympics. Now look, a lot can happen. She's only 13, right? But in the United States, she's one of two at her age group, and the other girl's a year older. All the way up to F-17. I think they changed the ranking system, so it's messed up. But she's in the top 25 in the entire country at 13. She's the best 13-year-old skier in the entire country.
Wow.
So she's doing things that girls who are 17, 18-year-olds aren't doing so she does mogul skiing. If you don't know what mogul skiing is, look it up.
Yeah.
She's doing certain things.
Shit wrecks my knees.
Yeah, right. She's doing certain things from the air that others aren't doing. But my point is this: she skied this weekend in a comp and only took 7th, and she was devastated. She thinks she needs to win all the time. But again, she's racing against girls 18, 17, 19. But why she was devastated was 3 girls came in from Australia, and they were in the same age class. Up until this weekend, my daughter was undefeated in her age class. And so she's what's called U15. She's only 13, so she's in 2 years in that age class. She's the youngest. She's still U13 next year. So she's beating all the girls her age plus a year older. Undefeated, was crushing them. But these girls came in from Australia and beat her.
Damn.
Oh, man. She was not ready for that. You know what I'm saying? And she had beaten those girls last year. They had come in last year, and she had beaten them. So she was bent sideways. And, I mean, I've never seen her struggle so much mentally. Like, it punched her in the nose and set her back. All of a sudden, she's not the best in her age group, and there's people out there that can be better than her, and blah, 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 blah. Right now, all these girls are 14, 1 year older, but still, same age group. And so, after lots of conversation, I finally got her to this place where you're going to fail. Like, and oh, by the way, the goal question. You're not here to win this comp. You're not here to be the best skier at 13. You're not here to be the best skier in F15 or U15. You're not here to win championships, which comes up in a month and a half. You're here because you want to win the Olympics in 6 years. So if you happen to lose to these girls, so what? And so, she's only 13, so it took a lot of work. But what we settled on is, and she's going to get a T-shirt, next step. That's what we settled on, next step. So I got to a point, I said, okay, Ava, you're right. I get it. You're frustrated. But you lost. Well, you didn't lose. I mean, 7th out of 50 girls, whatever. It's not too shabby. Yep. And she was the youngest. But here we are. What's your next step? Are you going to continue to be mad and complain and be angry and, say I don't want to do this and believe that you can't get it done and not participate? You know what I'm saying? Or are you going to train a little harder? Or are you going to try, right here, next step. Next step. And I zeroed in on that, and it started to turn, and I think I got her. And so that's my message to everybody, right? Even us sitting right here, everything we just talked about in the last 2 hours or 3 hours, good or bad, is great. But next step.
Yep.
Like, what are we going to do next? What are we going to talk about next? When are we going to take a break? Everything, once it's done, I just said that, it's done.
Yep.
Next step. Next step. And so you zero in on next step. Failure the only question you ask is, how much do I leverage that failure to drive next step? That's it. Next step.
So goals are really, I'm on a journey, right? Whatever you want to call that. Goals are really interesting to me because I think if you actually get down to the heart of what is a goal is a destination at the end of a particular path or series of paths.
A journey,
right? And so I think we put so much emphasis on goal setting and not enough emphasis on path choosing.
100%.
And I think that, because it's interesting, and I'd be curious to see how you push your daughter in this or help her push herself. What happens when she wins the Olympics? What's the path after that? And a lot of that comes back down to identity.
Yes, great point.
Is okay. So what I've tried to get back into the realm of is I'm playing an infinite game.
Yeah.
Right. And so therefore there is no goal. There are milestones, there are destinations at the end of paths, but once I reach that destination, there's another path to choose, or infinite amount of paths I can choose.
Yeah.
Those paths are set in stone. So I've become more of this is where I would love it, when I get when I get to continuously invest in. So I mentioned my declarations. So one of the things that is part of my declarations is that I shape the hearts of men.
Yep.
I set them free. I instill abundance in their being, right? As I instill in them abundance is infinite, right? There is an infinite ability for all of us, I believe. And so now there are some limiting factors to all things, but I think you can probably find use cases outside of, even with disabilities and things of that nature, you can still accomplish a lot within the box, right? there's an interesting thing about goal setting where I think that we are not meant to be fulfilled.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Period.
Yep.
I don't think that fulfillment is a state that human beings can accomplish. Right? I think that to the point of infinite creation, I think we are called to create. And I think that far too many people wrap their identity up in the goal as opposed to wrapping their identity in their being of who they become on the paths as they accomplish goals. I genuinely believe that there are paths to any outcome that you want in life. Period. Right? So if I want to be the president of the United States, I would never want that job. But if I wanted to, there is a series of paths that if I get better at path choosing, I could get there.
Yep.
If I want to be the richest man in the world, there is a series of paths. Now, do I want to take those paths? I don't think so. But I think that if we start to emphasize path choice over goal setting, goal setting is important, right? Because we need to know destinations we want to get to. And, if I'm in Knoxville and I want to get to Denver, right? That's a destination I want to get to. I have to get better at choosing paths, or else it's incredibly inefficient, or I'll end up somewhere else that I don't want to be.
Agreed.
So goals are important, destinations are important, but emphasizing the path and de-emphasizing the fulfillment that comes when you get to the destination.
I really like that. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to make a few changes. And I feel somewhat relieved I don't have to make massive changes. I just to emphasize a little more. So one of the things I've done with all my daughters, one of the things I've done with all my daughters is I've emphasized mastery. I've emphasized the effort in the journey. So I've emphasized the journey, right? So as it relates to Ava, just because her goal is so more clear, right? Like my other daughters would be successful, maybe run a business or whatever, but they don't know what they want to do. But right now, Ava's very clear. I want to win 2 gold medals in a row, okay? She's very clear. But part of that process has been being the best as you can be. So it's, can you do better? Did you put all in the effort? Are you working hard enough? And I literally had a conversation with her just last night that I said, babe, you understand that all of this that I'm talking to you about isn't so you can win the Olympics. It's going to follow you everywhere you go. So if and when you win an Olympic gold, if you don't, great. If you do, great. When you're done, it's now next step. Am I going to become a CEO? Am I going to become a mom? Am I going, what's next step? But you now have all of the skill sets to move to whatever new identity you choose.
Yeah.
Or new path. I don't like identity, but new path. That's well put. So you can be the best in that path. So that when you pass someday, you will look back and people have seen you as Ava is a person who excelled at whatever she chose to do and was able to build whatever life she wanted because she learned to build that life and build that identity for herself.
It's super good.
But I want to re-emphasize it. So what I like what you said is I haven't put enough emphasis on that. I put a lot of emphasis on mastery and learning to get better. Yeah. And I put a lot of emphasis on how that gets to the goal, but I want to connect that piece better. So that was good advice.
Because the path, I think, we hear this a lot, like learn to fall in love with the journey, right? Because if you think about it on the time horizon is each goal or milestone is a very, very, like you talked about, it's here and it's gone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You get that gold medal, once it's over, it's over.
Yeah.
Right? And so then to Tom Brady's point, like 7 Super Bowls. When he got his first one, that was probably his first goal. And, well, then what? Well, there's an interview, I think, after he had 4 Super Bowls where he's sitting down and he's talking to I don't remember who it was. It might have been CNN or something like that. But they were asking the question, and they're like, I mean, certainly you got to be satisfied at this point. What's next? And he goes, God, a 5th Super Bowl, you know?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that he also, and I've listened to enough interviews with him and Kobe and some of these greats, where they emphasize the love for the paths, right? Because on the time horizon, you've got paths are all of your whole life. You're on a path, and you'll have pit stops at destinations. But if you put all your joy, hope, fulfillment, satisfaction in the destination, you're going to live a pretty unhappy life.
Yeah, it's like the idea of the people who have that. I'm not going to be gender specific. The people who have this whole idea that I can't wait till I get married and have a family. So they finally get married and have a family, but they never thought about what they're going to do with it once they have it.
Yeah.
Right? And so then what happens? Well, the marriage isn't what I expected it to be, and being a dad isn't what I thought it would be, or mom. You see what I'm saying? So they're focused on, I can't wait to get married and have a family like that, like because I've been reading too many fucking children's books, right?
Yeah.
So they get to the destination, but they're not focused on the journey. So no, I completely and utterly agree with you there. I
think it's huge to instill that in our kids. That's something I try to speak over my kids.
So with that, I want to stay on I'm asking you a question, but I want us to stay on the family thing, but I want to go a little deeper.
Please.
I want to go into the idea of affection and connecting with kids. What do you think? Do you think there is I want to ask a couple questions. Do you think there is an appropriate, inappropriate type of affection? And do you think gender should play a role in the type of affection and love and support you give your kids?
That's a great question. Are you saying is there a threshold where it becomes inappropriate?
No, because obviously there's a threshold when it comes inappropriate. So that's not the question. The question is,
what role does it play?
No, the question is what is affection? Should gender play a role in affection? And then what type of affection should kids be given?
No, to the point of gender, no.
Okay, so elaborate.
I've got 2 boys.
Yeah.
I'm an incredibly affectionate dad.
Okay.
I make sure my kid I speak over to my point on declarations. I speak over my kid what I believe he is, what I know he is, right? And so there's different types of affection, right? There's verbal affection, there's physical, etc. I want my kid to have such a security. So one of my declarations, I'll keep coming back to it, is I am protected, so I am a protector. Yep. I am loved, so I'm a lover, right? And so my whole belief system is around you pass on to your kids, right? That which you are, that which you give, they then pass that on, at least in most cases. And so what I don't want to get to my deathbed and look back on is to say that I ever withheld from my kid. Because I know that if I withhold from my kid, he's going to match what I did and probably still withhold from his kid.
Yeah.
And so my generations behind me will be folks who are we are beings who seek affection, affirmation, etc. I want my kid to be secure in his identity, but I also want him to be someone who genuinely knows that no matter what, I want him to live an unconditional life, right? So part of my declaration as well is Gabriel and Rowan are unconditionally loved. They feel safe with me, right? So these are parts of the things that I say every morning. Have it on my freaking note card in my pocket. I want them to know that because I want it to be unconditional, so they don't have to seek it elsewhere, because they will seek it.
Yes.
And they'll find it.
Yep.
But it won't be the right type of affection and so on. So, the whole daddy issues thing, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real fucking thing.
Yep.
And so, every morning I'll hug my kid until he lets go.
Do you kiss your boys?
Oh yeah.
Kiss them on the lips?
Oh yeah.
Will you do that when they're 13?
Yeah.
And will you do that until they ask you to stop, or forever?
I'll probably try forever. I don't find it weird. I don't think it's weird.
No.
I think that there's a cultural thing around it.
Look at us finding middle ground on the left.
But yes. Yeah. And I don't, I think that our culture is overly sexualized.
Yes.
And so I think that we take affection and pull it into the sexual category.
Yes.
And I think it's detrimental to them.
Fucked up.
And so I had to pause and think about it, because even the cultural stuff wants to work on me.
You were doing self-assessment. You were processing.
100%.
Yes. And you took a good solid stand. Yes.
And so I want them to feel loved into eternity for as much as I can have an impact on that for them. And it's something I'm passionate about, right? I think that my parents were fairly affectionate. My dad was decently affectionate with me. He was also very stern in some areas, and so there's daddy issues or whatever. Like I always try to please him. Yeah. I think there's a difference in my kids don't have to earn my love.
Yep.
I do think they don't have to earn my love, but I don't think respect is given for free, right? So you have to earn my respect, but you don't have to earn my love. And I want to instill that in them.
I like that.
And so I think that's something that I've taken into my parenting. My wife is very affectionate. She's, the 5 love languages or whatever.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a missing one. She's all of 5. Gifts, affirmation, et cetera. So yeah, I would say, I think it's a big piece of being a parent.
100,000%. I think the sexualization of this country is
disgusting.
one of the biggest destroyers of the family unit, and no one's talking about it. Right? Now, I don't have boys. I wanted boys, but that's a whole different conversation. But I have 3 girls, and I kissed them on the lips. And for a little while, my oldest, when I respected her. She's like, didn't want me to, so I didn't. But every time she gave me the cheek, I said, all right, baby, this is for you because this is what you want. But you need to understand, there's nothing weird about this. This is daddy loving his daughter. This is not about sex. And then it's funny, she's 18 now, so about 22 years ago, 18 months ago, she started letting me kiss her on the lips again. And I don't think I pushed her on it, but I said, what's changed? And she goes, I don't know. But I'm chalking it up to I was able to normalize it, right? And even now talking about it, knowing people are going to watch this is a little bit of discomfort because I know some asshole is going to try to sexualize
We're going to end up on LinkedIn.
Yes, and they're going to try to sexualize this and try to make this fucked up. But I think that's the problem. When I was a kid, my dad kissed me on the lips until I was, we had a fallout, but it had nothing to do with that. But that's what I knew. And my mom did too. My mom passed when I was fairly young, but still. And my youngest daughter, again, this Ava, my skier, fucking brilliant. She brought this up too. I forgot what got us on it, but I gave her a kiss and it was on the lips, and somehow we got into some conversation, and she used the words you used. She goes, Dad, I don't understand why people have to sexualize a parent-child relationship.
Yes.
And I was like, you're 13, right? She got it. Got it.
Yep.
So I want us to think for a second, as a society, what are we doing to parents and children's relationships when holding your 22-year-old daughter's hand as you're walking down the street is somehow inappropriate and sexualized? What are we doing to a society where I'm a single dad now and their mom's in their life and no ill will, but she just lives 2 hours away. So I have the girls 95% of the time.
Yeah.
At different levels, they still want to come up and sleep with me, right? They'll sleep in the same bed. Why is it that me just saying that opens me up to some people sexualizing? This is a problem because it undermines the closeness. It undermines. Sex is an entirely different thing, people, than being close and affectionate and feeling safe with your parents. If my daughter and I, my 18, we're going to go on a trip to look at colleges. If we only have a king bed, there's nothing wrong with she and I sharing the king bed. If we have 2 doubles, great. I get more room, right? But our society is every year pushing this Puritan ethic thing that any type of touching or any degree of touching, particularly sleeping in the same bed, kissing on the lips, holding hands, is sexualized. It undermines the ability of parents to maintain a healthy, affectionate, safe relationship with their children.
That word's key.
Yeah, it devastates me. It devastates me so much that I'm even uncomfortable sharing some of this stuff because I don't need the backlash.
Right.
But back to that point, do I care about being liked? I have the greatest relationship in the world with my daughters. My daughters feel unbelievably safe with me. We have some of the most amazing conversations that they know they can come to me about anything in the world. So fuck you to those people because I'm sure your relationship with your child is fucked.
Yep.
Because they don't feel close, because it's just, I love that you kiss your boys on the lips. I love that you'll continue to do that. They will appreciate that. And of course, like I said, if they choose not to want to, then you respect that. I respect 100%. It with my daughter. I just want her to know it wasn't sexualization.
Well, I think it bleeds into even just outside of affection. I think that we are in a time period where it is normalized for your kids at 18 to go off and never come back.
Yeah, I don't want that.
Right? I mean, I have a 70-acre farm, not so I can just look at grass.
So the kids will come back.
I want them to build their family there. And I want it to be, the whole compound, whatever is so frowned upon, but it's no, we have values and we have a community, and I want to build a community, and I want there to be trust there, and I'm going to give you boundary, I'll follow boundaries, et cetera, but I want to invest in your life and your kids and our, hopefully great grandchildren and et cetera. And so why would I not want that nearby?
Yes.
I think that we have this empty nester mentality of just getting rid of the responsibility as a parent. It doesn't end when they're 18. Like
Nope.
you as a parent should last until the day that you cease to exist. And so traditionalist or whatever you want to call us, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. We joke all the time. I want my kids to come back. Like,
Yeah.
I tell them when they finally, quote unquote, decide to go wherever they go, I'm going to have a house in the mountains, which I do now, but probably a different mountain, so that I'll be within 5 miles of ski resort, and I'm going to have a second house on the beach.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do summers on the beach and winters there. And my expectation is, knuckleheads are going to come all the time.
That's right.
And we're going to I'm with you. Like, I have no plans on my kids moving on. And, knock on wood, so far, we're really tight family. So I suspect they will continue to come back.
And that's going to yield a ton of fruit.
Yeah. I didn't have kids for 18 years to move on. It wasn't a checkbox.
Right.
I had kids to have a family my entire life.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Pull up and empty the clip. Pull up and empty the clip. Pull up and empty the clip. My shooters pull up and empty the clip. Reload that bitch and then empty again. My shooters pull up and empty the clip. Reload that bitch and then